go. Excellent. Good evening, Littleton, and welcome to the Select Board meeting on Monday, July 13th, 2020. We will begin by starting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Knox, if you would lead us, please.
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For tonight's agenda, we have reading of the mail and organization at 6:35. Although we are already running a little bit behind, we're going to have department and board updates, including a shared streets and spaces grant program offered by the Mass DOT. We're going to review a home rule petition language revision regarding the smart sewer project. We're going to have a continued discussion on operational considerations for reopening town offices, as well as an emergency staffing policy. We're going to have a discussion on reopening town buildings, fields, and play areas, including 300 King Street. The next agenda item will be public input and members' updates. That will be followed by a joint meeting with the Finance Committee on year-end departmental transfers. That joint meeting will be followed by a joint meeting with the Planning Board on current status of affordable housing and senior housing goals and objectives, local preference, and plans for the future. I have all page, it's two-sided. The next item we have a public hearing scheduled at 8:30 for Fallon's Wine and Spirits liquor license to consider cancellation under Mass General Laws, Chapter 138, Section 77. That will be followed by a board and committee appointments and a continued discussion on remaining appointments to be filled. Then we will have a town administrator update regarding a review of the draft special town meeting timeline, a review of proposed changes to the host community agreement with the Harvest Club, a host community agreement certification for Littleton Apothecary, Cannabis Control Commission's notification of a marijuana establishment for G7 Laboratories, an acceptance of Helping Hands mini grant for GPS units regarding the Elder and Human Services vans. Then we will have a permit approval for 9 Air Road and a update on the soil removal permit regarding 64 Spectacle Pond Road. That will be followed by a review of the Board of Selectmen or Select Board meeting minutes. And then the Select Board will enter into executive session and will not be returning to open session following that meeting. Thank you. So we will start with the reading of the mail. Town
Thank you, Madam
Administrator?
Chair.
Thank you.
We have 4 pieces of correspondence in the packet. We received a letter from Greg Franks at Xfinity regarding changes to the Xfinity channel lineup. A letter from Betsy Friedberg of the Mass Historic Commission regarding the nomination of the Benjamin Kimball House at 12 Robinson Road, also known as the Baker House, for nomination at the National Register through the National Register. An email from Verizon regarding a rate increase of $3 to $9 per month for certain FiOS TV plans. And finally, a letter from Jennifer Maddox, Undersecretary for the Department of Housing and Community Development, announcing Littleton's designation as a housing choice community for 2020, which makes us eligible for grants, as the board knows.
Excellent. So the next item on the agenda is department and board updates. We have a shared streets and spaces grant program solicitation that we received from the Mass DOT. And I believe we have a couple of members of the Transportation Advisory Council that are going to join on this conversation. Joe?
Correct. I have Gary as well as Nicholas already promoted to panelists. If they can unmic on their end, then we can have a conversation.
Great. Hi, Gary.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you
Good.
today?
Good, thanks. Do we have Nicholas as well?
Yes, I am here as well.
Oh, excellent. Hi, good evening. So thank you for joining in the meeting. As you know, both Gary and Nicholas had brought this to my attention, that we received a notification from the Mass DOT about a grant opportunity, and they were wondering if the board might have any input or suggestions about the grant opportunity itself. I know that Gary, I think you presented a couple of ideas, potential projects to be utilized or pursued under the grant. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about those?
Excuse me. Well, I thought, first off, I think I should just give a quick discussion of what the grant program is. It's intended to be a quick launch, quick build program with grants as small as $5,000 and as large as $300,000 to improve sidewalks, curbs, streets, parking spaces, off-street parking lots in support of health, safety, mobility, and commerce. The types of projects intended to meet the goals for shared streets and spaces, outdoor dining and commerce, better buses and safe routes to school. This is all coming out of, I believe this is money they probably got from the federal government to basically address impacts associated with COVID and be able to, again, have outdoor dining and do some work with shared streets and spaces, both in terms of the, you say sidewalks are tight or congested, having a little more space for those to have space available for people to get out and about, but also getting consistent with the Complete Streets initiatives. Nick, do you have anything else you wanted to add to that as to what you understand about the grant program?
I think that's a great summary. This came up in the context of talking about kind of near-term opportunities for us to improve transportation around Littleton, and we're talking about the bus programs and some of the challenges that we've had with bus programs as well as landline. And there's the state program itself for shared streets, and it seems like there are some great opportunities for Littleton with shared streets. And there is another program run by, I think it's the Solomon Foundation, that is specifically kind of a planning and proposal program that is to help onboard communities into the state's shared streets and spaces grant program. So it's kind of a grant for applying for grants. And both of those seem like they could provide great opportunities for Littleton.
Okay, great.
So some specific ideas that were thrown out, and this is more of the brainstorming, this is not necessarily an endorsement from Transportation Advisory Council, but more just Nick and I just putting some thoughts on paper and sending it to you, Cindy. And they were to repurpose some of the areas around the common, adjacent to some of the shops and the restaurants there, and using those for outside dining or commerce. To start visualizing what sidewalks and bike lanes might be in the common area, say along Great Road and King Street, by designating areas of those roads for sidewalks and for bike lanes, using either temporary paint markings or cones or some kind of barriers. Right now there are no sidewalks, for example, on the east side of Great Road, and given what we're trying to do with the new change in the code in the common area, it helps it to maybe put some things in there that could be considered a precursor to what might be there in the future. Also, I know we're pursuing grants for the safe routes to school, and why don't we just show what the sidewalks might look like along Shaker Lane, which have no sidewalks presently. Things like that, with some ideas that were thrown out there. It's okay if some of these actions are temporary, especially if they're tied into a more permanent impact.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So I wanted to just bring this before the board. I know we have a few initiatives under the master plan, like Gary had mentioned, specifically the revitalization of Littleton Common, the outdoor dining and commerce, was interesting to me, and as well as the shared streets and spaces. I had attended the MMA this past year and learned about a parklet, which is basically taking a parking space and converting it into a temporary space, an outdoor space, just to kind of visualize what could be there. Some ideas were a beer garden, or you could have an art gallery, or things like that, and that kind of, parklets reminded me of some of the potential initiatives in this grant application. So I just wanted to bring it before the board and see if you had any thoughts or comments to share.
Right along the lines of like a pop-up, right?
Yeah.
That's, I think, from your summary,
Yeah,
going back to the MMA. No, I think it's great that MassDOT and our BPAC and our Transportation Advisory Committee are all jumping on this and looking for opportunities to, get people outside and expand spaces, with folks being concerned about being in enclosed spaces, whether it be to eat or to view art or whatever it happens to be.
right,
And there are some opportunities. We've got that parking space between Common Convenience and 17 Stevens Street that could be a pop-up area where we might have the opportunity to do something. I know that somebody just did some landscaping there to open it up and clean it up quite a bit, right adjacent to the Common,
right,
just right across from the Common.
right.
So that, maybe there are some opportunities with spaces that we've already got to do that kind of a quick turnaround project. But yeah, if you guys have some specific ideas, and whether they're short-term or long-term, I'm certainly open to hearing those. And I would certainly loop Mr. Stoddard in, which I believe you already have. I know he's aware of it, but just to see what the impact would be
Right, right,
to his department.
right. Yeah, and I think the ideas that they presented, I think any of them could work or benefit the community. I don't know, Matthew, do you have any comments, or?
I mean, I will defer to the Transportation Committee. I think they probably, but one thing I was just reminded of was there's sidewalks along Shaker Lane, might be a good idea.
Yeah,
Like, that's where a lot of people walk,
right,
and their kids,
right,
Yeah, the
But
youngest-
something like that, I don't think I need to tell them. I think they have plenty of good ideas,
Right.
probably way more ideas than we have money.
Mr. Knox, do you have any questions or comments?
Along with what Matthew just said, I think that I'm just happy we have people who have the energy and the foresight to take this to the next step and get it done.
Yeah.
I appreciate all the work that they're doing.
That's excellent. Great, thank you. So Gary, are you looking for anything specific from the board this evening, or did you just want to just hear
Well,
our?
someone has to jump in into the fray and start doing something, so we didn't wanna do anything, or have anybody in the town start taking some action without making sure that it's vetted and you guys are on board with it. Looking at the grant application, I don't think it's a heavy lift. It's as simple as a grant application I think I've ever seen. But I do think expediency matters, because one of the requirements is that any of the projects have to be implemented and operational by October 9th. And these grants are being issued on a rolling basis, and I think once the money's gone, the money's gone. So, I do think you mentioned Mr. Stoddard. I think Chris should weigh in there. I don't know if his office could potentially jump on some of these. We're willing, I think for the TAC and for Nick, I think we could galvanize some resources to help with putting this together. I don't know if this is a Chris Stoddard-led thing or we're leading it, but I don't think any of us should do this without the other in communications.
Okay.
I'm just gonna jump in here again real quickly. One of the things that came up across our desks within the last year was, we do third Thursdays at Fay Park, and you can certainly attest to this, Matthew. It's challenging at best as far as parking is concerned. And there was some proposals, I think Alicia and Tim and some folks from Park and Rec, and maybe I think Mr. Stoddard might have been involved as well, just to look at some design ideas around adding parking along Foster Street adjacent to Fay Park. So Gary, that might be something where we do kind of like pop-up retail once a month during the summer when we're not in a pandemic, with third Thursdays, but there might be some opportunities there, especially where this is one of those, I really call it a quick start. there may be some design information already available that we could take advantage of to try to get a project to go quickly. And, you know, it's anywhere from 5,000 to 300,000, and I think that the numbers, I'm probably wrong, but I think Alicia and Tim had some numbers like in the $130,000 range or something like that. It's a rolling admission as far as the grants are concerned, but it's, you know, if we don't take a shot, we're gonna miss every one that we don't take, so. It might be one area of opportunity, Gary, is certainly the Shaker Lane sidewalks is one, which would be a long-term benefit, but I think there'd be some long-term benefit from doing something along Foster Street and Fay Park, too.
Great. I was just looking on page 4, there's some program details about successful applications. Will be ones that include specific goals, so maybe we could just revisit those. But certainly we'll support any initiative that is eventually decided on, and just let us know and keep us posted on what you need from the select board or any other departments in town.
I guess I would ask that maybe you could reach out to Chris Stoddard. I have not heard from him in a little while,
Okay,
and maybe ask him to get in touch with me.
Sure.
To start talking about some ideas and who potentially could take the point and be in support roles for any of these items.
okay, excellent. Can do that.
I'm just gonna throw another one at you, Gary, just as, Steve Mark from the school department might be another person that would be interesting, where they address specifically bus stops and safe routes to school. Steve Mark, being the business manager for the school department, may be another resource. We can't tell him what to do. You're gonna have to reach out to him on your own. We can advise Chris to give you a call, but
Okay,
I guess one input is, I'm hearing is, any of these ideas sound good to you?
Yeah.
You'd like to maybe prioritize Shaker Lane, Fox Street idea, but whatever we come up with, you guys would support. I'm hearing that as a
Yeah.
general comment.
absolutely.
Okay.
All right, great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have, so the next agenda item is the smart sewer project, home rule petition language revision. And do we have Mr. Lawler on the call?
Let me.
You hear me?
Are you there? Hi,
Hey, how's it going?
good, how are you?
Good.
Good.
Yeah, so I've been working with Representative Arciero, and he has an amended, legislative bill in front of you. It's basically what we voted on at town meeting in the fall. This is a few, I call them very minor changes. This was also reviewed by, Tom Harrington, town council. But there's really no substantial change to this document that's in front of you.
Okay,
Do appreciate you sharing the amendments with us kind of along the road, Nick. Just, you know, kind of helped us to kind of have an understanding of where things were at, and no surprises. Appreciate that.
all right.
Yeah, no problem.
So just some minor changes. Any questions or comments from the board?
Nick, where's it go from here? After the third reading, what happens?
Yeah, so it's in third reading in the House. Once it gets through third reading, it'll leave the House and go to the Senate and go through the same process. And then it gets voted on, goes to the governor for signature.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so I believe we have a motion.
We do.
Just share screen, 1 second.
I don't see it.
It's in,
Move that the select board vote to approve the language proposed for the amendment of House 3937 and to authorize the town administrator to submit the draft letter presented reflecting the board's vote. Requires a roll call. Just need a second.
motion's been made.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste?
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus?
Aye.
And Cindy Napoli is aye. So the motion is approved as written. And we are on to next agenda item, continue discussions on the operational considerations for the reopening of town offices and emergency staffing policy.
Okay, Madam Chair, I'll address this item. In your packet was a copy of a PowerPoint presentation that was the subject of a, sorry, as I'm just bringing things up. That was subject of a all staff meeting last week. Within that meeting, basically gave people an idea as far as where we were, what we've done to date, and then also to identify what the next phase is. I don't know if any of you may have noticed, even coming down here, you'll see that there's increased signage. There's wall dispensers as far as for sanitizers. On each floor, there are hallway markings. There are floor markings within each office area identifying visual markers on how to maintain separation. What's happening now this week, and I should point out in the PowerPoint, there was a date error, said Monday, July 15th. That should have been Wednesday, July 15th. The fire chief is going through and evaluating each space to basically transition to what is known as phase 3, step 1. What that means is that each department space has the necessary PPE, the necessary markings, signage to allow for employees to come back. Once go through all of town hall, then that would allow essentially all of town hall to then transition from phase 2, where we are just last week, into phase 3, step 1, and then eventually to phase 3, step 2. Depending on the building, for example, DPW, they have a common area where the public is let in. It's very controlled. Visitors don't have full access to the full facility. That's able to transition a little easier than, say, town hall, where we don't really have the ability to segregate and lock people within corridors or portions of the building. So working with the fire chief as well as the regional health director, we're evaluating each space to transition. And so that all staff meeting was basically just to give people an update, identify what we're doing, and also identify some of the limitations as far as within common areas to make sure that people wear masks, limit the amount of people that are in the lunchroom, break room, mail room, so that, one, they're wearing masks, but it's more of a transactional area rather than a communal area. You know, what we're experiencing here in this meeting is another example where because of occupancy requirements, we can't hold a large meeting and need to maintain 8 people per 1,000 square feet. So a lot of those things are still going to be going forward as far as limitations on space, but for a lot of departments, their staff is already back. And maybe some high-risk employees that haven't come back, or we haven't been able to fully implement final separation as far as plexiglass or dividers. But those were dropped off and installed last week. So now we're just at that phase of the fire chief coming through and giving his blessing that a space such as our office, the selectman select board and town administrator's office, is then transitioned from phase 2 to phase 3. So that's going to be happening this week. And we will be keeping not only staff, but then also the board apprised as far as how that is going, so that everyone is aware where exactly we are.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board?
I've got just a question, Joe, since you're one of those named in the on the committee.
Yep.
And I mean, clearly, it's not ideal. Even before any of this happened, when people would come into the town hall, they'd come into a hallway, and there was basically a sandwich board. And, if you want to see the town clerk, you look on the pegboard and you try to figure out where you're supposed to go. Not very welcoming, not very inviting. So ideally, if you went to a town hall and you have some sort of a lobby area, a vestibule, something like that, was there any discussion about potentially, having somebody sit here, whether it be a work-off, somebody who's doing work-off that's not not high risk, someone that's willing to do it, that could maybe sit here and direct folks, and, they'll know how many people are in the building. And again, when we go to the grocery store,
Yep.
they have people, gatekeepers. So has there been any discussion about doing something like that? I don't think that hallway, personally, I would want to sit for a couple of hours in that hallway directing traffic. And this allows certainly enough space where somebody could come in, turn that table around, and so, any of that discussion at all?
It hasn't specifically, but it is something that, and one, I should point out that this reopening is really, there's a lot of reevaluation as we go through each step, and that there's a lot of opportunities to revisit practices and identify what's working, what isn't working. And that's one of those things that, would probably be good to look to see how that could function, because by the time we're looking at transitioning from moving from appointment only, so right now, people that would be coming to town hall have been primarily met out in the parking lot. You may have seen town clerk with a table out there registering voters or doing marriage certificates. Town planner taking applications in the parking lot. By moving to phase 3, and that's why there's a step 1 and step 2, is to allow for, say, someone to come in, to be logged by that department that's receiving them, either attending a meeting upstairs or doing business. But essentially, they are being guided along the way. Once we transition out of phase 3, step 1 to phase 3, step 2, that's where there would be limited access and something that we might be able to evaluate to see how that could happen. A lot of the people that we end up engaging for some of those end up being, some of the senior tax work-off people that then we wouldn't want to expose them. But I think that's probably something that we could evaluate to see how we could implement to then guide people and make sure that, because logging still needs to be happen. When people come into the building, we need to log them, what office they're seeing, what time, and also when they leave. Same thing as far as even cleaning schedules, quite frankly. We have to do a lot of documentation to make sure that we're keeping track of all this information in case something happens, and we do have to essentially do some tracing. So that's a point that, definitely we'll raise to the fire chief and regional health director to see if maybe we can start pulling something of that together. This space has been identified if someone wanted to come down and look at an application rather than walking all the way through, to have it as some sort of space that then is more easily cleaned once a person leaves.
Yeah, that was kind of my phase 2 was exactly, to have a couple of workstations where folks are able to socially distance, but there's actually someplace that they can sit down and look at plans or fill out an application or that kind of thing.
Right.
Where, to your point, you don't have people traipsing through the building,
Right.
you don't have to have that person
Correct.
accompanying them. Yeah, okay, so it's, just wanted to offer that up, and I'm
Yeah,
glad that
no,
it's
thank you.
something that you're open to.
Yeah, it's difficult because it's an old building. Certainly.
Yeah, it really is.
Any other comments or questions?
Nope.
Great, thank you, Joe, for working on this, and
Thank the
to
whole
everybody
committee,
else
too.
involved.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on to a discussion regarding a reopening of town buildings, fields, and play areas, including 300 King Street. I know that Selectman DeCoste had asked that this be specifically included on the agenda, so I'm going to let you lead it off.
Sure. So I know that we've gotten both sides of the coin, essentially. We've all gotten a number of phone calls, maybe we haven't, but I know I've gotten a number of phone calls from folks saying it's out of control at the beach, or it's going great at the beach, it's out of control at Castle in the Trees, or it's going great at Castle in the Trees, what's going on at the track, is it open, is it not open, but things like that, and just, I know that during our last meeting, there was the question of who's policing what. We've received emails as recently as today, relative to issues at the beach. And so over the course of the last week, when the agenda was being set, I had a number of folks that had reached out and stated and given evidence of communities in which there are basketball courts. I happened to be in Waltham yesterday, and their basketball courts are open. There actually was somebody physically there kind of policing who uses what courts and how many people, and it looked like it was limited to drills and skills, and I didn't stop and ask questions, but there was definitely people on the basketball courts, and it is just folks that are concerned, that don't want to put themselves or others at risk, but they'd like to use the assets that we have available, and the basketball court was specific. I did ask specifically to discuss that. The Board of Health did meet last week. The Park and Rec Commission did meet last week. The Recreation, what is it called? Reopening?
Recreation.
Joe was unable to attend last week, so I stepped in and we had the discussion. So after that meeting, I did ask Cindy if we could add 300 King Street, just for a discussion. Because there are people that are asking, and I just wanted to offer it up and say that there are, the select board in Westford supported the basketball courts opening with certain signage that is placed at each location. Whether a sign works or not is incumbent upon the individual. People have to take responsibility for their own actions, and I think that we can, essentially, the way I saw the sign that the town of Westwood put up was more of a CYA, so that nobody could come back and say, the select board said that we could use the courts. My son or daughter came in contact with another child that tested positive, and my son's or daughter's positive, just to kind of cover their butt. So just wanted to open the conversation, have the conversation, just so that those folks that are, who oppose the courts being closed, the courts are closed right now. Board of Health has made that, they took that vote. Park and Rec Commission meets tomorrow night. I think they're gonna have the conversation tomorrow night and try to determine what their recommendation would be, I guess. And because we did take action on closing down that whole address, 300 King Street,
Right.
prior to either the Board of Health or Park and Rec doing anything, we felt it was the responsible thing to do to close it and then deal with the fallout after the fact. So I'm just looking at the other side of that coin. Are we at the point now where the coin has been flipped and we can take action to open that on, maybe on a temporary or a very limited basis, and see how it goes? No, go ahead.
I know the concerns come up, and with me also, the people have called me to ask that question, but still the problem with the meetings that I attended with the COVID Recreational Working Group is that if we could have somebody there that could monitor who's actually using it and keep people apart, then that would be fine. But as the last meeting I went to, they didn't have the personnel to put someone there to do it. And we all know that those are nice basketball courts, and sooner or later, your pickup games start. If there's not somebody there to monitor what's going on, those courts were in heavy use before this all happened, and people looking to get back. And I think that was the reservation, was if you're gonna have a coach go down and run individual drills, fantastic. If you're gonna have someone monitoring what's going on there, fantastic. But come 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night, what happens? Almost the same thing happens at the beach. The beach seems to be running great all day until after the time that our employees leave, and then there's no one there to monitor what's going on, and people are close together, and we all know things are happening there that we as a board should be looking into to bring that under control too. But so there's two sides of it. I understand it.
Yeah, exactly.
We have the facilities that should be used because it was meant to be used for that manner, but how do we regulate that right now? And then I see the other side to the whole board too, is that it matters on where you go in the state or out of the state, how people are handling this whole situation, which makes me wonder again. I went to another softball tournament this weekend, and you go to the store, which is right next door, you have to wear a mask, do the whole thing. You get to the ballpark, I'm the only one that's wearing a mask. And that's, you know, and granted, a lot of people are distanced the same way we are. The athletes can't be, but so it's, I guess I'm bringing up something that I don't have a solution for, but I think it's a concern a lot of people have. Are we moving too fast or not? But
I don't think any of us really have the silver bullet or the answer, but I did, whether I agree that they should be open or they shouldn't be open, I do feel as though the conversation should be had and have the, deliberation and, try to make sure that we make a determination that's gonna be the safest for the most, so.
Matthew, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, I think the safest thing is to leave them closed. I mean, I actually hadn't thought about it until I got this set of emails, and it's pretty unanimous. Both the Board of Health, which says, we don't have jurisdiction, but we still don't think they should be opened, and the Park and Rec commissioners all say, please don't open it. Basketball is not an approved sport. It's a full contact sport. Pickup games will happen. It will. And whether or not those happen with or without the signs, I mean, I think saying that the basketball courts are closed will probably discourage many of the people who would play otherwise. And as far as like people, you know, in other places that aren't taking the caution that we might be, I feel like Massachusetts in general is doing a great job. And I'm really afraid there's gonna be a giant second wave of infection when the people who are getting lax now, like, you know, when it starts spreading again. I don't think it's time to relax our caution yet.
Right,
And I do think we should keep them closed.
yeah. I agree. I agree, based on, you know, the comments from the Board of Health and from the Park and Rec and the Park and Rec Commissioners. You know, we need to take those into consideration, strongly into consideration. And I just think as far as, you know, opening the courts, I just don't see the need to do that. You know, and to, you know, Matthew's point, the state as a whole has done really well, and our community's done really well. So you know, I'd like to just stay the course, and I just don't think that there's any need right now to change anything and change our initial thought on keeping them closed.
And I think that those two boards, as well as ourselves, as well as each, like the Littleton Youth Basketball Association, they could certainly be putting together a plan and do some of the research and try to find out ways that would work effectively. They've got a number of volunteers that do coach, you know, the youth basketball program. So, you know, maybe there is a way to be able to do it, but it's somebody else needs to kind of take responsibility for it. But it is something that I think can be worked on. And I don't disagree with anything that you guys have said as far as, you know, the risks and
Right.
using, it's not even an abundance of caution, just
It's caution, just
Yeah,
regular
yeah,
caution,
caution,
I think,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I appreciate you bringing it forward, and it's a discussion that we needed to have, so. And certainly something that we can revisit down the road, so. Excellent. So we are now on to our next agenda item, public input and members' updates. I will start with members' updates first, I believe, Mr. Knox.
A couple things. I know that when we talked about the transfer station and what we're gonna do as far as changes go, maybe in prices and things, I know that our employees at the transfer station do one hell of a job. And a lot of times they take verbal abuse for decisions that we make and whatever. But I took a video of what they call the grump, Chris down there sometimes, and this just happens to be Chris, if you can run it, playing in the puddle with my granddaughter. Can you run that?
Oh, that's cute.
So there's Mr. Grumpy, the one that people
It's Joe's
yell at.
thumb.
Oh, that's adorable.
So it's even better if you could actually hear it, because they're both laughing their heads off. So I just thought it was a human side of what goes on up there, because they do take a lot of abuse. And this came out of nowhere. She was in the puddle, and I was calling her to get out of the way. And next thing I know, that Chris is over there jumping in the puddle with her. So I thought it was something that was worthwhile. It actually goes. I have a tape.
Sorry,
Too much feedback with both devices, yeah.
I was trying to just
Yeah.
get the sound, but it involved unmuting me and
Oh,
then
that's
creating
good, yeah, right.
something else.
And just one other thing quickly, as we all know, that back in April, my best friend passed away. And it was hard for the family at the time because of COVID, that we couldn't do anything at all. And the reason I bring it up, we couldn't do anything, so we waited hoping to see COVID would go away so we could all get together with one big party. I don't want to go into details because I'll get all upset, but what we decided to do at Badges, we're going to have a remembrance on Friday from 4 to 8, and people can wear masks, they can keep their distance. There's only allowed so many people that are in there at one time. And then on Saturday morning, 11 o'clock, if people want more space too, there will be a graveside service that's going to be done right at the right at the gravesite for Kath, and appreciation for Kathy. For those who feel more free and want to drop by our house, no one knew how to party better than Kathy did, and there'll be plenty of stories and plenty of things to be said about one great lady that I miss tremendously, and I'd say more, but I'll let it go right there. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. She's certainly missed.
Very
Mr.
sorry, Joe.
Go to Matt.
All right, Mr. Nordhaus?
I don't know if this is proper. I want to ask about a Zoom feature. I wonder if we could turn on chat for just the host, so that people who are waiting in the audience can say things. It might make make Joe's ability, it might make it much easier for Joe to manage the meetings if he could. And I know that like you can turn on chat to host only in the webinar. So the participants can only chat to him and they can't see each other's.
I think that's an open meeting issue, though.
So I was thinking about that. There's no dialogue, and the other thing is, if someone is joining by phone, like someone could email him during the meeting, right? But someone on the phone couldn't email him during the meeting, and so it would be like the same sort of dichotomy, I guess.
So what happens with the chat feature is the chat conversations that go on then become part of the public record. So those need to be downloaded, they need to be incorporated into our meeting minutes. And so there was an issue before where people were hosting their own Zoom meeting to watch a Zoom meeting, a town posted Zoom meeting. So it became an issue of, you had a conversation going on that wasn't part of the public record, and it didn't get incorporated into what should be part of the public record. So that was one of the reasons we contacted the Attorney General's office to ask about that. So basically, with the chat function, it needs to become part of the public record. And it just, there wasn't a situation where it was a Zoom meeting within a Zoom meeting. So that was one of the reasons why the function was disabled. And also, it gets a little complicated, I think. So so you want to turn the chat feature back on?
Just for Joe, each participant could message Joe only, and they can't message each other. It would basically be a way, it's like, in addition to raising your hand, you could actually say something like, I have a comment about item 6, or, I have pertinent information about the discussion you're having right now. I am so-and-so.
Well, it's kind of like that,
The public input, I think.
yeah.
Just if we were back to normal
Yeah,
and we had 103 open, I think that the public input portion is, we don't necessarily hear public input on every agenda item. So
but if someone raised their hand during the middle of a meeting, you, depending on like what you were talking about and who they were, you might acknowledge them.
Yeah.
And if Joe has more information about what they want or what they're saying, he or we could make the determination to like take it then, or to wait until the public input section.
Well, I mean, so in the ordinary course, if it's a subject matter that we're discussing, they should raise their hand during that topic.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they should just raise their hand during public input.
Yeah.
That's the way we've managed it in the past. I don't know if it makes it a little bit more complicated if Joe's now getting, I don't see the benefit to turning it on, or now you're trying to, work with us during the meeting, and now you've got to respond back to people, or.
Right, and also, it's the board members and the chair who get to recognize, like, when do we have to move on? And if I then chat back, okay, hold on, then it creates this expectation that if the board does have to move on because we're half an hour late, then I've then either let them down or not allow them to speak because the chair has to move on business. That's the hard thing. Or they say a comment, please let them know this, and then I never get a chance. It's not easy, and we did consult with town council as well, and I know it seems a little harsh when it's sort of like just there's not it's all and then it's nothing. The challenge ended up being really about how then to mediate that, and also to almost have it reflect as much as possible the physical meeting where, because someone's raising their hand, the board doesn't need to, unless it's a public hearing, of course, doesn't need to acknowledge the comment because we do have to move on. So that's, totally understand the reason for the question, and it's about the implementation and how then, especially because even though it would be directly to me, it still is related, and has the potential to put staff in this weird middle place as far as being a moderator
Yeah, no,
almost
yeah,
of the
that
meeting,
makes
where
sense,
really
yeah.
the chair
Yeah.
runs the meeting.
Yeah, I
Right,
understand.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's fine.
So we do try to communicate as far as if there are hands raised, and you can actually see, like, on the TVs, when it captures, this footage, you can see, like, people with
Okay.
a hand raised.
Okay.
Anything else?
Nope.
Mr. DeCoste?
Just, I was charged with, meeting with the deputies and discussing their employment agreements with us. And I got feedback from each of them, which I can share with each of you in an email, and, we would need to take a vote, right? In order to, get them their steps, which would be retroactive to July 1st. Both of them, they're okay with the contract, the agreements as they are currently written. One of the things, Deputy Clancy, essentially, the agreement allows them to get a step increase, each of them to get a step increase. Tom's words were, I'm saying, I'm sure that he wants the money, but he said, I don't care about the money, I'd rather have an extra week's vacation. But so that is something that he would like to consider, and I'll send this all out to y'all in an email, just so it's summarized. But with Deputy Chief Patterson, when we sat down with him last year, we did, we looked at, some of the inequities in his pay, and we did say that we would do what we could to get him more than just a step in order to kind of get him back in par. And I'd like to try to see what the pleasure of the board might be in order to, I don't think we're gonna make him whole this year, but I think that if we can make him a little more whole than just, as we committed to him, we would try to get him closer to, on par with other deputies. So I'll submit some options based upon the scale that we work within right now, so that you guys can take a look at it. And, I don't know if we can, at this point, take a vote to at least allow for payroll to give them the step, and then if in fact we decide to do something further with either of them, we could do an amendment to that, I would imagine.
I think that, if I recall correctly, there was discussion on this at the last meeting, and we agreed we would move forward with the step, did we not?
I thought we did.
So,
I thought we were gonna make it retroactive, pending the conversation. So,
perhaps we
either way,
did.
maybe we take the vote if it's already, if it's a
What I
moot
would
point, then.
advise is actually just agreement, because it's not on the agenda. That way, as long as I have your agreement,
Consensus, yeah.
I can go in and give the payroll office the information that they need to move that forward. And then, once we do have it on an agenda, you guys can ratify it and do what needs to be done.
I'll get you
If
guys
the
a
board's
summary of-
comfortable with that
Okay.
approach.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that
I'll
sounds
submit
fine.
all of you the summary of the conversation, and just, this is what Deputy Patterson would get if he got this step, and this will get him that much closer to being whole. Sounds good.
Excellent. Great. I just wanted to say, attended the groundbreaking ceremony for the new library project on that incredibly hot, horrifically hot day. But I just wanted to thank everybody that came out for that ceremony, and especially LCTV that helped pull that together. Highway Department was great. They delivered some sand and some shovels, and it was exciting. I think it was something that the community needed right now. We had something to look forward to, and so I just wanted to say thank you for everybody that was involved with that. And that is all I have for public input.
I'm just gonna jump in, since you mentioned the highway department, just another thing that, it's kind of like one of those unsung hero things, like, for the 4th of July, the Common looked fantastic. They do things that happen without anybody really noticing.
Christmas lights.
Yeah, just different things like that. And
Right.
the other thing that I notice, I think it might be Chris Samarco, whoever runs the brush whacker or whatever it's called, the thing that goes around and cuts back all the brush. We've got a lot of country roads, and they get narrower and narrower this time of year because there's so much overgrowth. And, we've got a great crew that goes around and sweeps the streets and cuts back the brush, so that they take care of a lot of the blind pullouts. But they do a good job of the little things that we don't necessarily notice. So
Right.
you mentioned,
That's true.
with the transfer station, but I think all of our departments do a great job. But just quick little shout out for those little things that happen without us looking or noticing.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Okay, so we have a joint meeting at this time with the Finance Committee regarding end-of-year departmental transfers.
Don't we have public input?
Yeah.
Oh, public input. I
We
skipped
did
it
have one
last time,
hand
too.
raised.
We do? Thank you, Matthew.
That was just Cindy teeing up the finance folks to,
They're in the bullpen.
Looks
Run
like
to
we
the
have two hands
bathroom.
raised.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, I'd gotten bumped out, so I had to reconnect.
Okay.
I don't know if Mark in the control room can either give me back host again, because I can't.
How about I do it?
Or if you can,
I
yeah.
don't know, looks like I got an allowed to talk button. Oh, there we go.
Oh, he just turned it on, so.
It's Major Tom.
Bo Smith, if you can hear us, you're up.
I can.
Perfect.
Hi, thank you.
If you could just state your name and your address, please?
Sure, Bo Smith, 36 Moore Lane. I just had a comment about the basketball court. I wanted to thank you guys for bringing it up and discussing it, and I just want to add a little more information. To give a little background, I've been in town about 15 years. I'm a member of the Littleton basketball board. I am a USA basketball certified coach, state sports certified as well, and also run an AAU club program in the area. Couple things. So the basketball, right now, basketball courts are the only courts that are not open in town. I do respect the conversation. Look, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I do respect the conversation both ways. I do not believe that they should be open for games, even if they were allowed to under phase 3. So I am with you with that. Skills and drills are different. The skills and drills actually have been able to be open since phase 1 in May. Quincy, which I spoke with the director of Parks and Rec there, have had their courts open since May. Surrounding towns currently that have them open with signage, Concord, Lowell, Westford. So I think it could be done effectively like Chuck said. What I don't understand is, so basketball is currently looked at as a high-risk sport under phase 3, which I agree. Other high-risk sports, lacrosse, football, I'm wondering why those sports are allowed to be played on school grounds without being monitored right now, but basketball with signage is not. I don't know if you have the time to discuss that now, or if you can discuss it amongst yourself, after the meeting, but I would like to bring up that point. One other point I'd like to bring up too is basketball is the ultimate sport to be played for low-income families. I think we need to look at that. All you need is a ball. Other sports, low-income families don't have the ability to play. They can't buy hockey equipment. They can't buy lacrosse football equipment. So I think we're doing a disservice when we look at it that way too. I think there's a way we can both satisfy the need, still stay under the guidelines for phase 3, and control any adverse situations such as games very easily up at 300K.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Yeah, you raised some interesting points. I wasn't aware that football and lacrosse are practicing.
I'm not aware of whether or not they're doing organized practices, but
Okay.
I can speak to, my son does go
Yeah.
to Alumni Field with a couple of buddies, and they do drills and sprints and those kinds of things that they would do if they were in camp.
Right,
So they're doing a lot of that kind of working out, if you will.
right.
Not necessarily organized, and there's only a few of them, and
Okay.
socially distant. But The other point that I'd bring up for Mr. Smith and for anyone else that's asking questions about the school department or the school properties is we don't have purview over those properties.
Right.
So we can address 300 King, Fay Park, the beach, the Shattuck Street property, but we really can't speak to, we can advise, we can, give our opinions and recommendations, but the school department definitely has purview over those facilities.
Right. Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smith. And do we have another?
Madam Chair, we did have.
It was Alicia Day, yeah, I already elevated her
Yeah.
when I was clicking buttons.
Do we have anyone else besides Alicia? Joe?
No.
Okay.
Alicia?
Should I unmute myself?
No. Hi, Alicia.
Hi. I'm like trying to figure out the camera thing here.
It's a nice photo.
It is a nice photo.
Hello. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good. So I just wanted to follow up on a few things that Chuck had mentioned, as well as Mr. Smith. According to the Park Commission, all of the actual fields are closed at this time, as well as the basketball courts. The agreement that the Park Commission had come to, a vote that was, I believe, in June. It might have been in a special meeting, I'll have to double check. But the vote was taken to allow youth sports, including basketball, to be allowed to turn in a management plan, and then to be granted access for use of either the courts or the fields. But that would just have to go through our department. We have, one of the baseball teams has put in a management plan. And essentially, if that's not accessible to any of the organizations, we're happy to work with them. A lot of the, national organizations have a lot of these plans already drawn up, so it's pretty easy peasy to find that information. But essentially, it's how will your coaches implement COVID-19 in these groups, and what expectations they have that they're guaranteeing to the town that they will be taking these measures to make sure that the kids and the programs are safe, as well as the staff that is working with the kids. So I just wanted to clarify those two pieces, that the athletic fields were not opened yet. And the only individuals that will have access are Littleton Youth Sports at this time. Littleton Sports, so yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for that clarification.
Thanks, Alicia.
You're doing a great job. Parks and Rec is doing a great job. I gotta commend you guys. You're on top of things. You always have the answers that we need. Thank you. And all of you. Thank all of you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Are there any other requests for public input?
No.
Okay. Okay, so now we are on to our joint meeting with the Finance Committee. I see them coming into the meeting. Just let me know when they're all ready, Joe.
They're all getting mic'd up and videoed up.
Okay.
Did the new guy get initiated yet?
What'd you have in mind, Chuck?
Sure, we can come up with something. We'll do it on Zoom, so everybody can enjoy.
I think we're ready. We all set, Joe?
Yes.
Great. Excellent. Thank you for your patience. So this is our joint meeting with the Finance Committee regarding year-end transfer requests. Cheryl, do you want to lead us into this, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So as most of you probably know, per MGL Chapter 44, Section 33B, in the last 2 months of the fiscal year or the first 15 days of the new fiscal year, by a vote of both the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, you can transfer appropriated budgets to another budget for a authorized use by law. And so at this time, we have about $55,000 in total transfers. These are no increase or decrease bottom line. It's just transferring budget from one budget line to another that needs that budget for the year end. So the first budget line is town meeting expenses with a budget increase of $7,903.89. This is for our annual town report, postage, we had increased mailings, the town meeting booklet, we had costs for the special town meeting and the June town meeting, remote captioning, number of items that contributed to that budget. The next would be the town administrator wages with a budget increase of $20,111.24. This was directly related to the stipends that were paid to the emergency responders during COVID. The next budget item is a budget increase of $84.07. That's for conservation wages. Those again were extra hours that she worked during COVID. Conservation expenses are decreasing, so that's the offset for the $84.07. So it's a wash between the expenses and the wages for the conservation budget, and that they were underexpended due to our budget freeze. Next is the ZBA wages, budget increase of $160.96. This is for overtime for meetings for administrative support. ZBA expenses decreasing by $160.96, so again, an offset from expenses to wages, again, underexpended due to the budget freeze. The central communications expense needs a budget increase of $4,369.94. This budget, when it was created for FY20, wasn't actually a sufficient budget for central communications. In FY21, that budget has increased to $115,000, which is the appropriate budget for that line. Building expenses, a budget increase of $13,676.77. And then it's a decrease of the building salaries of the same amount, and that's because we had contractors in the interim until we filled the building commissioner role. So it's just a moving of the salaries that we would typically pay for the building commissioner to the expenses because we had consultants or outside individuals performing those services. Wastewater expenses increasing by $6,500. There were emergency repairs needed at the pump station and the replacement of pumps. Board of Health wages increasing by $947. The offset is the Board of Health expenses decreasing by $947. The increase is due to overtime for Board of Health meetings. The decrease was unexpended due to the budget freeze. Neshoba nursing expenses increase of $1,024.04. The FY20 budget didn't actually reflect our contracted costs. Our FY21 budget does reflect our contracted costs. The SANS assessment, which is actually Williams James College referral services, interface services, needing an increase of $500. Again, the FY20 budget wasn't reflective of our actual contracted costs for that. Veterans wages increasing by $249.62. These were additional veterans agents hours going forward in FY21. He's on a set schedule and scale, so it shouldn't be an issue in FY21. Veterans expenses increasing by the same amount, so it's an offset between the veterans expenses and the wages. Employee benefits decreasing by $40,409.11. This is due to just low changes with endorsement changes and credits that we received from the health insurance plan. For a total budget increase of $55,527.53 and a budget decrease of $55,527.53.
Great,
And this requires a vote of both the select board and the finance committee.
okay, sure, certainly.
Cheryl, can I jump in and just ask some questions relative to overtime? I mean, if we're dealing with people that are working remotely and then they're getting paid overtime to cover meetings, especially during a freeze, I'm under the understanding that during a freeze, there is no overtime. How do we justify that?
So the overtime was justified by the Board of Health and the ZBA boards directly. And they're the ones who had the authority to approve the overtime for the meetings.
ZBA is appointed by the Board of Selectmen.
ZBA is appointed by the Board of Selectmen, yep.
Board of Health is duly elected.
Right.
So I'd grant that that's probably an authorized expense, but
The zero sum balance, so.
Correct.
so as of right now, if for whoever's covering meetings, if they're an employee in a department and they're covering meetings as the scribe or clerk or what have you, are they adjusting their hours so that they're not getting overtime to cover meetings, or how are we accounting for that now?
So my understanding is that going forward for FY '21, that this would not result in overtime or an increase to the budget, and that they will be adjusting their hours. However, Nina, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe if they are working overtime, that they can adjust their hours, and they can also take comp time, but we can't mandate that.
That's right.
I don't want to even get into the comp time conversation, but, okay. What was that?
Was there a comment? Any other comments from the Board of Selectmen?
I don't have any.
No.
No, I don't either. Are there any comments from the Finance Committee?
No.
Okay.
Move the select,
Go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Are we still paying the stipend for the first responders?
No,
The
we're
extra
not.
stipend?
No, we're not.
No.
Do we know how we were gonna fund that when we originally authorized it?
What was the question? I didn't.
The
We know how we were
stipend
going
for
to
the first-
fund that when we originally authorized it. We
Response.
basically said we'd find a way.
Okay.
Am I correct in that statement, you know?
That's my understanding, yep.
And we were pretty much assured that there would be a way that would be able to do it. Either way, we were gonna find a way.
Any other questions or comments?
It's well worth it.
So ready for a motion?
Move that the Select Board and Finance Committee vote to amend the FY '20 operating budget per MGL Chapter 44, Section 33B by transferring funds from to various budget line items as outlined by the Director of Finance and Budget in a memorandum dated July 8, 2020, titled Year-End Transfers.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Select Board, all those in favor? Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste?
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus?
Aye.
Cindy Napoli is aye. And then
Alan?
Mr. McCray? I can't read who's up there.
So it's Alan McCray, Betsy's, so, Alan McCray,
Yeah, I'm here.
do you want to take the vote, the roll call vote from your board, or you want,
Do the roll call vote. Al Bell?
unmute, please?
Al Bell?
Alan Bell's a yes.
Greg?
Thanks, yes.
John McRae?
Yes.
Tom Burrell?
Yes.
Gary Wilson? Yes. Alan McRae, yes. Thank you.
Betsy?
You're in your vote?
Betsy doesn't get the
Oh,
vote.
you forget Betsy?
No.
Betsy, I'm sorry.
You asked a question. You already spent your time.
At the bottom of the list.
That's where you are, so
Alright,
you
watch the Brady
I know it is.
The Brady Bunch.
Great. Thank you.
I'd like to just add one comment on the stipend. I would just ask, as I was chair during that time, if I may, Alan, that we just kind of get in the loop a little bit more on that, so we can get ahead of it and find out probably, we might not have to come to a year-end type transfer situation. We might have been able to get more creative before the end of the year, that's all. I understand the timeliness of it was critical. But I would like to have been more involved in that process personally, that's all, just so that we could have educated the FinCom on what we were trying to do, and what was being done. That's all.
Okay. Thank you. All right, excellent. So now we are on to our joint meeting with the planning board to talk about affordable housing.
Starting to promote well, and I have the ability. And we're also jointly with the Affordable Housing Trust, correct?
I invited Bartlett Harvey. I sent an email out to the Affordable Housing Trust Board, but I'm not certain that we have a quorum with that board.
Okay. I think everyone's here.
Is everybody on?
Everyone who's on
Is
on.
Mr. Montanari there? He's the new chair, correct?
I don't see Mark on the line,
Okay.
unless he's by phone. Mark, if you're out there, raise your hand or press *9 in case we don't know that you're there.
Hannah just
I
brings
see.
herself up.
I see Yana. Okay,
Oh, looks like Mark's out there.
is he out there?
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you, members of the planning board for,
Jerry?
Oh.
Jerry Platante?
is Jerry there? There's Jerry.
Jerry's here.
Yeah.
Can you see me?
No.
No.
My eyes are closed.
That's a good thing.
Are we all set, Joe?
You just said that too.
Okay, great.
I heard that.
I thought I was muted, sorry.
There it is, stop video, okay, see if that works.
Okay. We good? So thank you for agreeing to this joint meeting to discuss affordable housing and senior housing bylaws. There was a few conversations that had taken place recently regarding housing. Specifically, it began with discussion about the Cooper Farmhouse and transferring that over to the select board for utilization of affordable housing purposes, which kind of promulgated this conversation. And just speaking to developers and speaking to members of the planning board, realizing that we're really not meeting the target. I think that we intended to meet with, when we developed and created the bylaws that we currently have in place for housing. And I did put together a presentation. Joe, I don't know if you can pull that up. Okay, excellent. All right, good. So just the next slide, Nina. So, and I'm going to speak for myself when I say this, as far as when we were creating the housing bylaws, the senior housing bylaws, affordable housing bylaws, it was really my understanding that the envision was to create affordable housing and to housing alternatives for people living in Littleton, basically our senior citizens and our younger population, so that they didn't get priced out of their homes. And there was three main objectives: create affordability, preserve open space, and diversify Littleton's housing stock. As we know through our housing production plan, which was created a few years ago, Littleton does have an unbalanced housing stock, which is something that we really needed to correct for many reasons to benefit the town of Littleton. And one of those being equitable development. Nina, if you could switch to the next slide, please. This is from the Littleton's master plan. One more slide, please. And basically, equitable development is mentioned in the master plan to ensure that Littleton has opportunities for residents of all ages, backgrounds, and incomes to have suitable, good quality housing in the town of Littleton. And it's important to provide and maintain a diverse mix of housing options so that existing residents are not priced out as Littleton continues to grow and housing increases in value. And that is certainly something that we're experiencing right now. We see it with our senior population. They are getting priced out. They can't afford to live here. They can't afford the real estate taxes. And it's unfortunate because we don't have the housing options that they're seeking so that they can stay and remain in the community where they've grown up and spent many years. They want to stay in Littleton. The other reason for affordable housing in Littleton, which was one of the many things, many messages that resonated throughout the creation of the housing bylaws, was to keep Littleton a thriving town and also to promote the health and well-being of the community as a whole. Littleton is not a diverse community. We do not offer housing for a variety of age groups and of people of varying backgrounds. So that was another one of our objectives that I feel that we're falling short on. We have taken steps to ensure that Littleton remains a thriving town and that we do have opportunities for housing for a variety of members of our population. Nina, if you could move to the next slide. And the planning board has done an excellent job. You've been very proactive over, I don't even know how many years now, that we've been working on the housing initiative, or you've been working on it more specifically. And I know that you overhauled a few bylaws, when they first didn't pass at town meeting, and I just don't have the dates or specifics of that. But these were just some of the steps that were taken regarding the 55 and over bylaw, the accessory dwelling apartments for owner-occupied residential homes, the inclusionary housing bylaw. I'm not quite certain, and I'll defer to Maren about the town's open space development bylaw. Allowing greater density was one thing that I know that we've done. I can hear our consultant's voice ringing in my head. Density brings affordability, and it helps preserve open space. So that was something that we instituted. And something that I'm proud to be part of is we created the Affordable Housing Trust. So we have been proactive in taking steps to provide the type of housing that we wanted and we felt needed was needed for our community. Next slide, please, Nina. Next one more. So these were the expectations, I believe, when we created the bylaws. It was to support our children, our seniors, families, employees, and individuals by encouraging a variety of housing types and employment opportunities, by providing quality education, a well-connected and accessible transportation network, and services. These were all visions of and goals of the master plan. And in these slides, you can see specifically the groups that we were really aiming to help through the bylaws. Our senior citizens, as well as our younger residents, people entering the workforce, people who grew up here, who maybe wanted to stay here, as well as older residents who spent their lives here and wanted to continue to live here. and be a part of their community as they exit the workforce. The other big piece of it is looking at who can't afford to live in Littleton. And that includes the people we rely on every day for services. There are first responders, our school teachers, our hospitality, people that provide hospitality services. I've actually spoken with Chief Wodzinski, Chief Pinard. I've spoken with the Highway Department and other departments in our community, and they indicate that their employees can't afford to live here. I know the fire department has specific concerns with their volunteer corps network. A lot of those volunteer firefighters are not from this area. They can't afford to live here, and it really has an impact on our that department. Next slide, please, Nina. So this is just from the Data Town offered through the Mass Housing Partnership, which is one of my favorite websites, as Maren will attest to. So this really shows where we're lacking in our demographic. In Littleton, as you can see, we have a below state average in age groups 20 through 34. And then we do have a high level of residents starting actually at age 55, right through 85 and older. So those are the demographics of our population that we were really targeting with these bylaws. And then the next slide, please, Nina. And as you can see through the housing production plan, changes in householders, what's interesting to me is that these age groups prefer the same type of housing. They want something that's affordable, minimal upkeep and maintenance. They like amenities, common areas and services. Seniors like the camaraderie, and younger adults like the convenience. Next slide, please, Nina. And another component that we already talked about was our unbalanced housing stock. Currently, Littleton offers very few housing choices outside of single-family units. And this is a problem not only for residents who currently live in Littleton, specifically the age group 25 through 34, and our seniors, but as well as other members of society who require or rely on more affordable housing units to live. Not everybody can afford, certainly a majority of people can't afford the type of housing that's being created here in Littleton. So one of the things that we aimed to accomplish through the master plan was to balance our housing stock. And I don't see that we're achieving that goal either with respect to the type of housing units that are currently being built. Nina, the next slide, please. This is information that was taken from a survey that was conducted by Elder and Human Services. It was a town-wide survey. Our former director of Elder and Human Services had shared this with me, because oftentimes we're asked, well, what type of housing do we need? What type of housing are our seniors looking for? And this pretty much provides a good snapshot of the type of housing units that we're looking for, specifically broken down by age group. And as you can see, it varies from single-family homes to multi-unit homes. There's been a lot of talk about senior independent living facilities, apartment and condominiums, assisted living facilities, and other types of housing units that we could build and create that would help serve residents of Littleton. Nina, can I have the next slide, please? And there's also the need for subsidized housing in Littleton. I don't think many people realize this, and I know that people work with the Littleton Housing Authority, including Mr. Nordhaus, and Bartlett Harvey has joined us as well. This was information that I received from the Littleton Housing Authority, and we do have people on a waiting list for housing. There's 1,400 families who are not residents of Littleton that are in need of subsidized housing. And that figure actually goes even higher. I know it goes as much up to 10,000 people. But these are families that are living in people's relatives' basements. They're living in shelters. They're living in hotels. So there's certainly a great need for subsidized housing in this area. And that pertains to some residents of Littleton as well. There's 19 families from Littleton who are in need of subsidized housing. And some of them, there's senior citizens as well, too, that you can see from this chart that are in need of subsidized housing, just because they can't afford currently the market rate rents that we're offering. And so the next slide, please, Nina. So this is some information I got from the Greater Boston Report Card for 2019, was just released. To me, this was a really interesting report, and this snapshot that it provides. Actually, let me just tell you a little bit about the Greater Boston Report Card. So the report card is made up of research from a team from the Dukakis Center, the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, the UMass Donahue Institute, and Boston Indicators. And what it does is it recreates a report card which provides insight on key issues and challenges facing Greater Boston housing market. And it also provides a town-by-town examination of affordable housing practices and recommendations for changes. And the challenges that are being seen statewide include an insufficient supply, a lack of housing affordability, and inequity in access to housing. And so what has been done to address these challenges is the governor adopted what's called best practices. The town of Littleton, under the direction of Keith Bergman, has actually adopted 6 of these best practices. And their best practices are a multi-pronged approach to help counter municipalities' home rule. So basically what that is saying is it's really to encourage municipalities through zoning changes and bylaw changes, expand beyond their own little inner demographic to create an increase of housing, including high-density housing, small multifamily buildings, and accessory dwelling units. And it says in the report, while discouraging frivolous objection to new development, more units available at a variety of price points in a variety of settings are needed to meet the demand and reduce the extreme local housing cost burden, which grows heaviest on those with lower income scale, on the lower income scale. So this is something that has come up in recent conversations, and it just was interesting to me because Littleton has done more than its part, as you can see from this little chart, this little image about where we've overachieved. We've accomplished our best practices as recommended by the governor. Our housing production, we're top of the list for housing production. And it interestingly also says that we're doing very well with affordability. I think that's because of the number of affordable housing units that we currently do have.
Basically the 40B number that you
The
had.
40B, exactly. So it's interesting looking at that. We are lacking in housing diversity, and we're lacking in racial composition. So one of the things that I learned through this report was that Littleton's permitting, and I'm going to try to explain this the best I can, it's 173.4% relative to its proportional share of housing need. So what that is saying is the state determined the volume of housing anticipated to be needed by the year 2025. And basically, Greater Boston region, which Littleton is a part of, must produce an average of 21,333 units of housing per year. Communities with ratios of 1.0, above 1.0, are doing at least their fair share of production for reaching regional demand. So as you can see, based on Littleton's permitting, at 173.4%, we're doing more than our proportional share of housing need to meet regional demand. But we're still not really meeting the demand for our community, based on the type of housing that's currently being built and the price point. So that's one of the reasons, the main reason actually, that I wanted to invite the planning board to this meeting, to just have a discussion about it. It just seems that we're not meeting the target that we need to meet, with the housing that's being created. And so I just think that it's important that we kind of take a step back and maybe look at what we're doing, maybe have a discussion about what we want to do going forward, if changes we might want to make. Especially if we're creating that volume of housing. And it's benefiting the state, but in some respects, it's not really benefiting our community. And it's not benefiting a large populace of the state as well, so,
We're helping the state meet their number,
yeah.
but we're not filling in the gaps that we have.
Right.
And it's important just to put some context around some of the numbers that you gave are relative to the Magic sub-region, which is part of the MAPC. You mentioned Keith Bergman. Keith has been a great player for us,
Right.
and he still represents us with the MAPC. The MAPC, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. The Magic sub-region is 13 communities around us, which is the Minuteman Advisory.
Oh, you had to put me on the spot.
Right.
Minuteman Advisory,
Group on Interlocal Coordination.
that sounds about right.
Right,
So those numbers have to do with, I mean, it goes as far as Lexington, Sudbury, Stowe, but it also includes all those communities that we touch as well. So there's 13 communities included in that. Just
Right.
when you're talking about a lot of the numbers that you quoted,
Well, this was
especially on this slide here, with the 1,400 families needing
oh, right,
housing.
exactly, that is pertaining to that, you're correct.
And specifically to Littleton, of those 1,419 families, 25 elders or elderly are in need on a
And that
waiting
might have
list.
changed, that was the last update I received from the Littleton Housing Authority, those numbers could change.
But certainly, it's something we need to be constantly aware of, but I think the last point that you made is, we're doing a lot with the help of our planning board,
Right.
to meet the demand statewide,
Right,
but it's not necessarily helping the local need.
right,
It's,
exactly.
and, where are we getting the support
Right.
in those areas? And with the help of the planning board and some additional bylaw amendments and changes and that kind of thing, we might be able to address some of the multi-unit dwellings and things like that can meet, especially with the workforce population. Just go down the road, down 110, where Red Hat is, and you look at, across from the 99 restaurant, that's all workforce housing. That was the whole purpose of that development being built. That's all apartments.
Right,
So I know Mr. Champney was on the previous joint meeting with FinCom. He has some reservations about an apartment building in Littleton, but I think the appropriate development that meets the appropriate need is something that we could certainly benefit from as a community.
right. Well, I mean, and that's why, and I'd like to hear from the planning board too, on this. So there was actually another,
Don't mean to call Greg out.
no, I know, I'm sure he's still on the call. There was a great slide that talked about how we could determine when we weren't meeting our goals. And I know Anna's on the call. She had shared that with me. But it really spoke to, in the master plan, how will we know when we've achieved our housing goal? And if you look at that list, it basically validates that we're not meeting our housing goal. And we've been into this for a few years now, so I just figured it was time just to take a step back, and just I wanted to hear the
Can you
plan.
share that slide?
Yeah, let me see if I can find it. I have it.
Can I ask the
So
chair?
the slide that, Chair Napoli is referencing, in the master plan, at the very end of the document, there are all of the backups to all of the different charrettes and forums and meetings that were held. And so that's what she is referencing, is there was one particular forum in which folks got to talk about, well, how do we know as a town when we've actually succeeded on these goals?
Right.
And it's about a page and a half.
Well, what are they?
What,
are the
Jerry?
What are the numbers?
There aren't any numbers, Jerry. I know you love numbers.
What do you mean by the numbers, Jerry?
Without a number.
Why are there two Annas?
Just got two things over.
Hold on.
But that's weird. I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, last Cindy, we got another Anna. I don't know if that's good or bad.
I don't know.
She's trying to sway the vote.
Let me see if I
Can I ask Mark a question?
Sure.
Mark, you and I have been along a long time. It's almost like a catch-up now that I see that way back, you know how the townspeople felt 20, 25 years ago. If you would have mentioned an apartment house, or if you would have mentioned anything being closer than 1 acre, then you wouldn't have been on the planning board very long. And I think what's happening now, we're in the situation where we're trying to catch up with something that we probably should have started a long time ago, but it wasn't the feel of the people at that time, who, and a lot of them who are my age now, are looking back saying, oh, I was part of that momentum that kept apartments from being built we didn't even want
Onside?
accessory dwellings. So now we're in this catch-up thing. I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Our bylaw specifically excludes apartments. We did the senior residential to increase the density, open for more diversity for seniors in town, specifically because we don't allow apartments in town. Now we're talking about changing that with the station and a few other things going on, but you're right, Joe. Up until a couple of years ago, nobody wanted to talk the bad A word, apartments. So now if we're gonna be more affordable, we have to talk about apartments. But we also have to talk about, if we're gonna increase the density, we have to get affordability, and we haven't achieved that yet.
We never designed around a product. We designed bylaws around sort of tolerance. We don't design around a product. If you want to attract that product, you need to design a bylaw that'll accommodate it. And you need to design bylaws that are interconnected and support that. We don't have that. Every time we get an applicant, we're trying to right size or fit it in, and they're never going to get the density to build affordable housing. We just don't build a product. I mean, that's what 40B is designed to do. That's why it supersedes local ordinance, so you can get the density so the builder can build it and afford to build it. We don't build at that scale. I mean, look what we just did with form-based code. And this is why I objected to form-based code from the start. It doesn't have the density you need to get that kind of housing. It only allows for an additional 200 units. It's not enough. You need a price point that's going to allow density, right? So you should design it to meet that. So it should at least have the threshold of saying, yeah, I can get my affordable units. I can do it at 120%. That's not going to hurt me. You can build it. If they can't build it, they're not going to. Doesn't matter what your bylaw says. They can't afford it.
Right.
Well, we thought when we started the senior residential bylaw that we increased the density to, you're getting 19 properties on 3 acres. That's a big step from 3 on 3 acres to 19.
I know, but it's not enough, Mark. That's why we did the 40B. It worked because we put 200 in, and it supported the 40A, and they could do the 20% affordable because it wasn't going to hurt him because he had the 200, and he had the cottages standalones as well. So they could make the money off of that product, and because they didn't have to worry about our bylaws. They could just
put it in. And the only thing that limited that size was their septic plan. If they could have got a bigger plan, he could have put more units up.
So now we're at a crossroads then, because I don't think the residents of the town of Littleton are gonna wanna see why.
I know, and that's what I'm saying, like, we like, right now, we're doing surveys, we're taking everybody's temperature. If you really wanna solve this problem, and I agree with you, Cindy, we need a diversity of housing. I mean, the fact that, you know, teachers have a hard time living here, I think there's a couple of people, you know, living over in the 40B, but there's not a lot of those, and those rents come in around 1,800 to 2,000, which is not considered really cheap.
Right.
So if we want to build more of that, we need zoning and we need support, and you're gonna have to push, and you're gonna have to stop thinking about, you know, we limit things to 2.5 stories. Maybe we need 4-story buildings at the point, and maybe in the downtown area. I mean, think about what you could do with mixed use if you had 400 or 500 residents living in the common. You could support a lot more retail, and if it's all walkable, you're not really worried about traffic. But we didn't do that. We did something smaller, and we wanted to make everybody happy. And I'm saying, if we're gonna make everybody happy, you're gonna get what you got, and you're gonna keep gentrifying Littleton incrementally. Because that's where the market is, and right now, that's what developers are coming in with. They're coming in with price points 500 plus. They're not building anything 300, 350.
Right.
So we need to build we need a product that can support a $200,000 condo, a $350,000 cottage house, and real discount housing.
Right.
We don't have that zone.
I mean, our develop.
Jerry, what the 40B is for, and we're at a disadvantage now because we've exceeded our 10% of the SHI. So we're not attracting developers that would normally come in and propose these type of products. I'm not sure first of all, Jerry, I don't agree with you that everyone would be happy with 4 stories in the common. I guarantee you.
No, I don't think
no one would be happy.
No, I don't think they would be happy. I'm not saying that.
But there are sites
That's the
that
scale
4
that would
story, like I agree with you, the point. That'd be, you know, in one of those back parcels, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, the original Cisco design was 6 6-story buildings.
Yeah. So there are, and I think we're going down the road at the train station area, and the Sweeney property at the Boxborough line, which already has, 3-story apartment buildings next to it. You know, there are opportunities in town that I think are appropriate. I was involved in the 40B approvals, and I will say that there was dedicated and tenacious opposition on the part of the adjacent neighborhoods. They put down their own money to hire attorneys and this and that. So for you to say that it was, they could have built more, no.
So if you look,
No, wait, Jeff, I was on the board at that time. I was deeply involved with that, and I can give you a totally different narrative on that.
Well, I was on the ZBA when they approved it. We had all the meetings. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry too. I was in all the meetings too.
Okay, hey
So
guys,
Jerry
can I
and
ask
Jeff.
a question? Back to Jerry's point, about the point. Does Sandparks have to build another hotel? Is there any way to talk to him about putting apartments in instead?
He's not necessarily building another hotel. That is one of the options.
For starters, we excluded, I believe we excluded apartments out there.
But we could change it,
Residential.
We have to change the zone, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, I'm trying to think outside the box and trying to think about something that maybe can be done more immediately. I mean, Littleton Station, we're talking,
20
a few years down the road at least. So, I don't know, maybe we should look at somebody should talk to Sandparks. Oh, it looks like Joe Layden is raising his hand.
Yeah, I hope you don't mind me sort of butting in a little bit, but I just wanted to comment, especially because there's a lot of talk about 40B, and I know in reading through the station report that there are other models that can be utilized, for example, 40R, and that there are different densities and development types, multifamily attached as well as single. So there is an opportunity to utilize 40R and craft it for something that not only would work by the station, but also by the point, and something that can be a mixture of different housing types rather than just sort of accepting a traditional 40B project. There's many examples out there as far as different types of developments that would utilize 40R, including one that I wrote for my last community. So I think it is something that while 40B being above the 10% for our SHI could be viewed as a negative because we won't get the attention from 40B developers knowing that they could basically just be walking into a node. It does give us the strategic sort of hand to basically say, well, here's how and where we want to have different types of development so that as I believe it was Jerry was saying, we have different mixture that we want to try to get for housing types and things that would fit within the community. Yes, it would require going to town meeting with a bylaw and working with DHED to adopt such a bylaw for 40R. But with 40S payments that then offset and basically make up a delta between what is raised with property taxes and the cost to educate children, there at least then can be a discussion as far as trying to reduce any future impacts that might be on the school system, but really most notably giving the town the flexibility to come up with more of a strategic plan. And plus, it strengthens our ability to get funding for through MassWorks if we're doing mixed use housing with retail, office, other types of commercial, compared to just looking at just one type of housing option. So the work of the working group, and as we move forward, trying to look at that station area plan, I think will be a benefit, looking at different options that might be able to meet some of the needs of the town.
Right.
I think you need, one thing for Vicky is, we do this all from like the anecdotal needs discussion. We're going through this TDR process right now, right? In TDR, there's a model. Inside that model, there's a bunch of numbers. They did the calculations. They know what the ratios are. They know what the price points are. They know how to make the TDR ratio work based on the due diligence they did. It's numeric based, right? NOI and receiving area density. That's done on basically some good math. You can do the same thing with some of our other bylaws and basically put your target density out there, and you'll know what your upper bounds are, and you know what your lower bound is. As long as you stay in that bandwidth, you know you're meeting your goals. Our problem is you put a bylaw out, you get a couple of developers come in, you end up with a development that, okay, you got a development, so you got some growth, that's good, but you didn't get what you wanted from the intent of the bylaw. It tends not to achieve its goal because it's not designed to achieve its goal, because it doesn't account for the market forces that are at play for that development. So they're going to try and fit it in, and then we're going to have a back and forth, and we're going to have to spend a lot of time, waste of time and effort, when we could basically be calculating all this and saying, hey, we know we can meet this target. We know you can build, by the way, in that price point because we designed it that way. And then you'll get what you wanted. You'll get the expectation that you wanted. And you know, all you do is wait for someone to come and build. But at least you have a product that you can market, and you know you're going to achieve that goal. You know you're going to get something that a senior can downsize to.
Right.
So I would actually like to add to the conversation and be able to say to what Joe mentioned about having a strategy around this, and to Jerry's point around having a number, goals around this. I think that that's where we need to be. There's a couple things that I think we actually need to be able to do to get to that point. I think there is some confusion even among ourselves possibly, and with residents around what kind of affordability we're talking about. Are we talking about big A subsidized? Are we talking about little a affordable for folks who currently work in town? So being able to really identify that is huge. And then I would say that the next part about that is actually trying to figure out which type of, or what number we're talking about. Because if we're talking about building 2,000 homes, well, that's, or 2,000 dwelling units, you know, that's a lot different than if we say, you know what, for the next 10 years, our goal is going to be to build 500 units. So I think we collectively need to come up with what that number is, and then that becomes the target. And from there, to Jerry's point, we can determine what kind of product we want. Do we want to have independent living units? Do we want that campus environment that we've been talking about for the last 4 years? And be able to meet those needs intentionally, because I do agree with what everyone's been saying. We've sort of had this reactive approach, and I think if we can step back and be much more strategic about this, I keep thinking, I know the right builders are out there that can build what we want, that have the experience in building what we want, so we don't have to shoehorn things in. So from that standpoint, I would actually ask our town staff, you know, where do we go from here to be able to get some additional subject matter experts that can help us quickly? This is, I mean, we've studied this to death. I think we know the answers for a lot of it. I think we just need to do some confirmations on some of this, and then we can start to work on the bylaw changes. So that's kind of my 2 cents on all of this. I think we know a lot. We just
Well,
need...
actually, on that point, I think we do need to do a lot of work there, and I know the way we're staffed right now. I mean, you know, Lauren's an expert. She certainly knows how to guide and get these grants going. I certainly think there's probably opportunity there, but, you know, one of the concerns I always have with you know, Lauren's workload is she's loaded. And she's, you know, in my opinion, she's pretty much always at capacity, and she doesn't have the support staff to do that. Now, we've asked for additional support staff, and we didn't get that money. If we're serious about this, we gotta fund it. And I mean internally, we gotta fund it, right? We need to free Maren up to be our expert, to go out and guide these plans, get the experts in here, do the consulting work, put the numbers together, really be able to focus on that so we can get a good product. And if you put, you know, let's say you put a year project together, you know, that may mean that she needs support to do that, and that could be additional staff for us. So, you know, if we want to share the burden here, it may mean some, you know, additional internal costs to support that effort. And that's, you know, I think that would be us putting, you know, a good faith effort.
Yeah. And I would add to that, Jerry, that on Friday, we had an opportunity, Joe, Nina, Lauren, and I, to talk through some of the planning department's work for the next year, and being able to get additional resources is clearly one of the top objectives that collectively the town has to figure out.
Okay.
Can I throw something out there?
Sure.
This might sound,
It's
can
going
I?
to involve a zoning change. There's no thing around it.
Yeah, of course.
The work that
Need
we're
Joe in.
going to be doing down
Need
at
Joe
the
in.
station
So he can
is
mute.
probably where it's all going to start. So we are going to get, don't we have funds still available from the grants that we got for the station project to at least bring in some more consultants?
Right.
Get some consultants.
Mark, hold on one second. Joe Knox wants to speak. Hold on. Go ahead.
This might sound far-fetched, but have we reached the point where if another parcel of land comes up, would the town consider buying the land? And would the town consider then saying, I want to be the builder, I want to say this is the type of housing I want there, and do it, obviously when the builder does it, and rightfully so, they do it for a profit. But if something come up like that, then wouldn't we be able to dictate that we're building this so we can have housing, a ranch for a school teacher or a police officer or something like that? I know it's probably a far-fetched idea, but it's something where we could actually dictate what we actually want if we bought the land and went forward that way.
Right.
That's not a far-fetched idea at all. As a
Yeah.
matter of fact, that's totally viable.
I think that's where we need to go next, guys.
Hold on.
That's what we talked about in the Affordable Trust.
Right.
that Cindy and I and Bartlett are on. We talked about the ability to partner up with the Littleton land that we already own or land that we can get, and trying to find a developer in the future to sit down and put together something. That is something
Public.
Right,
the Affordable Trust has talked about.
right.
What's the status of the property behind Acton Toyota?
Peter Kimball owns it.
Peter Kimball owns it.
So
It's a defunct 40B, it's,
wouldn't that be a
What the market will bear.
piece of land for the town to own? I'm sure it's a fortune, but
Yeah, are they selling?
I don't know. I mean,
That's-
I've heard like everybody else
I have
rumors
information on that.
Can I just want to call on, I want Maren, I have a question for Maren for 1 second. Maren, are you there?
Yes, I am, thanks.
Hi. Isn't there a formula that the Mass Housing Partnership says that we can utilize to work with a developer to create the affordable price point we're looking for? Is it called like a pro forma financial or something like that?
My understanding is that the pro forma financial is more of the town asking the developer to provide the financial information, all the details of their proposed development, and then permitting board or whoever's doing the conversation, working with the developer on sharpening their pencil and getting the development to the point of where it can provide affordability.
Right, so it creates more transparency between the town and the developer, but it helps us also to achieve the price point that we're looking for. And just have that upfront as they're working with the planning board. Is that something that the planning board's thought about utilizing or discussed?
Well, I mean, again, this is where I think, like, what we need to do is, like, deliberately look through all the tools at our disposal and analyze them and come back with recommendations. I mean, we can solution on this call all day long, but at the end of the day, it's gonna require some deep thought and some deliberative effort on what solutions we have and what are the best options for us
Right.
as a town. And then we can come back with a package, working with the other boards, to figure out, what's the right direction. And then if we think it's viable, we can start, getting detailed about it and then ultimately get to zoning change. Hopefully, let's say we target, I don't even know what a reasonable time frame is. You want to target a year? You targeting, 2021? What are we looking for as far as getting moving?
Right.
Where do we want to be a year from now, or what's the time frame?
I think it's an immediate time frame. A short-term time frame. Just because we still have, development, it's gonna happen while we're going through this process. So I think the earlier that we can address it, the better. So what are you thinking as far as determining, assessing the tools available, bringing together a subgroup to address this, or?
What do you want to focus on? You're not going to solve the whole problem, right?
No, but you just said, right, but you just kind of laid it out, Jerry. You said, we really need to assess what tools we have available to us, right? We need to look at that. We need to, I guess, assess the need, maybe look into those numbers a little bit more. What are the viable options? Certainly, there is town-owned property, maybe we can utilize that. But maybe just kind of sit down and walk through, come up with some sort of roadmap.
The other, certainly
Well, but I'm
property
saying,
is
like,
one of the
like,
resources. Hold on, Jerry.
are you
Hold on, Jerry.
talking about diversity?
One of the other resources, Jerry, hold on a
Jerry,
second. One of the other resources that we are skipping right over is if we're gonna be one of the partners in this, there's finances. There's a huge financial impact. So if we're gonna be buying the land behind Acton Toyota, or we're gonna be the developer, it's definitely a plan that we need to look at. But this isn't something that's gonna happen in 6 months or a year or 2 years or 10 years. This is something we need to plan to get in place, and we have to put a lot of ducks in a
Right,
row.
and so we're not even talking about, buying property's an option, but we might already own the property.
We have to work.
We can look right down the highway.
I would recommend that, the first step that any working group take a look at is the long-term plan, so that we are looking at what can be achieved in every 6 months, what can be achieved over the next 5 years as an example, and then maybe even longer term than that, because it does take quite a bit of time to be able to work through the new bylaw and then to make sure that it has been well vetted and then to get it to town meeting. So I
Right.
know that in talking with Maureen, earlier, during our goals discussion, just even for anything related to the train station, or, I mean, it just takes probably a good year.
Right.
To get a bylaw out there. So I do agree with you that we need to get started right away for any forthcoming changes. It's just a function of what that looks like. And,
Right.
but I do think a smaller working group would be a good idea.
Right, well, especially since we do have the train station project, and we do have the common revitalization that we're looking at. I think, yeah, I think we should circle back, form a working group, and just recap this conversation, and just come up with some options and a proposal to circle back with both boards to discuss. It's gonna take
Right.
a few discussions, I think, to iron this out. It's certainly not something that we're gonna resolve tonight.
And Madam Chair, I would also point out that, because there is a lot of work, part of that work definition, in terms of what our various purviews and jurisdictions are. So for example, when it comes to town land, the planning board doesn't have jurisdiction there, right?
Right.
But when it comes to creating the bylaw, we do. So I think being able to also identify where each of our roles is and so we can focus on that and come together, when we need to, that would probably be a good thing to
Right.
focus on as well.
Right, and the other component too is the Affordable Housing Trust. Certainly should be involved in this discussion as well, so.
Is everybody on these boards aware of all the town land that we currently do own that could be built on?
Where's
Anyone
Mark?
aware of that?
So we had an Affordable Housing Trust meeting. Mark came in, he had, what was it, 8 areas, Mark? And one by one, we realized that they weren't viable options, but it was town-owned
Yeah.
property, for one reason or another.
We could do Morgan's, we could do behind the police station, there were a few we could seriously look.
There's a couple of spots, right?
There are a couple, yeah.
This is having the town be developer. I do not think that is a good idea. I've been involved in projects in other towns, it never goes well for the.
We're still in Carlisle.
Right.
And Jerry, as you pointed out, finances is a big deal.
Huge.
Chuck may have pointed that out.
No, yeah, it's a big deal, it's a big deal.
So,
But
usually it's done by RFP and, you try to get private people to get in and, do what you want and you analyze it and then maybe 5 years later, something happens and there's a downturn and the guy goes bankrupt and then the town's on the hook.
So.
I don't want to be negative about using
That's
town
being as negative
Yeah,
as it can be.
so Jeff, if I may just interrupt for one
Yes.
second. So through the Affordable Housing Trust, we do have another avenue if we wanted to utilize town-owned property to partner with a nonprofit builder.
Yes.
And utilize resources available to us through the trust.
Yes.
So that's a
And
whole.
And the other thing that I don't know if it's been discussed, is we have a ton of potentially decent affordable housing stock in town. We have whole neighborhoods of small ranches. We have trailer parks.
Mhm.
Is there any way that the affordable housing groups who have money can rehab or initiate in perpetuity these as affordable places? These are neighborhoods that were built by people who built
Post-World War II.
Littleton as we know it today, and they were
Right.
perfectly fine living there and it supported their lives. And why can't we focus on some small scale rehabs, just like having.
Those are, and those are great ideas, and that's what I'm saying, if you're in a solution, that's why we need to be deliberate when we solution, because you're gonna throw all these ideas on the board, and
Yeah.
we're gonna explore all of them, and we're gonna
Yeah.
look to buy
So,
them, everything.
we-
Like Jeff, how many houses in Littleton could be rehabbed at 300 price?
Right, so we,
There's someone doing it on my street right now.
right,
But can Littleton accelerate that? Can Littleton subsidize that if it's gonna go to a targeted senior need or, I mean, Habitat Humanity's a model. Like, there's so many things that we can look at, but if we don't go through that inventory and do our own assessment and figure out what's gonna work for us, like, we'll be right back where we are right now, talking
Right.
about how we're not meeting our goals.
So we do have a lot of options to us, I think for, certainly the Affordable Housing Trust can be utilized in many respects, but I think for tonight's purpose, we're all in agreement that we need to do something. We just need to kind of craft what that looks like. So my proposal is going to be that I'll circle back with the select board, and then Mark circle back with the planning board. Bartlett's here from the Affordable Housing Trust Board, and we'll kind of formulate a working group, and create a path forward, and just continue this discussion offline.
Madam Chair, one more comment.
Sure.
The planning board has an update on the TDR survey, so at some point it would be great to have you all come to a planning board meeting to view the update.
Sure. That would be wonderful. And the other thing too is if during that meeting, if we could talk about the Cooper Farmhouse as well.
I have a very quick question.
Sure.
Do any of the town-owned lands that we're talking about not have some kind of conservation or ag restriction on them?
There has to be some out there like that. Yeah.
Do you know, or are you guessing?
There's so many, Matthew.
So many
that-
town-owned, you mean? That there's some of them don't?
Town owns a lot of
Okay,
property,
all right.
yeah. So I'm going to assume that there's some out there without restrictions. We
Okay.
found a lot with restrictions when we worked on that through the Affordable
Mhm.
Housing Trust, so,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah,
Morgan.
yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about
Yeah,
behind
so,
the police station.
um,
I think maybe has an ag restriction on it.
So we're gonna circle back with the planning board and go to their, attend their next meeting, or when the TDR is gonna be discussed, Mark and Anna, and then we'll also address the Cooper Farmhouse at that meeting as well.
Right,
Does that sound okay?
getting the farmhouse that's down off of Turkey, I'm going to need to discuss what we want to do with the disposition of that.
All right, so why don't we
Lump 'em
might
up.
as well talk about that at that time as well.
Yes, we asked the developer to give us an answer when they're gonna be turning the house, the barn, and the 5 acres that go with it to the town, and we're hopefully gonna get an answer back as to when we can expect it. Then we need to think about what we're gonna do with it.
Okay,
Well, we can give them a clock too, right? We've been pretty apathetic on
Yeah.
where we want to take it.
okay.
Is there a meeting date that's been identified for this meeting?
What,
Or is this just future unset
Yeah.
date?
September.
yeah, so, Mark and Ann, if you wanna just let us know, when you're scheduling your, forward meeting, and these items will be, discussed, then the board, the select board will attend.
Yeah, I'll get together with Lauren and we'll figure out a date and
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
be done with Mark Ransacott with TDR rights and get everybody together.
Okay, that sounds great. All right, thank you.
Is this your first meeting where you guys are all in the same room?
Second.
Second,
Second one?
yeah,
First one with a joint meeting, I think.
yeah, this is-
We
yeah.
don't have to start doing that, do we?
No, I select the Zoom stuff.
All right,
Is that because you can smoke a cigar during the meeting?
Absolutely.
All right, well, I'm sure we
You
should.
you might have to put a rating on this channel.
Oh, goodness. All right, thank you very much. It was a good discussion.
You guys don't
Thank
know,
you.
but it's pouring out, by the way. Yeah. Raining out big time.
My windows are down.
Thank
Thank you.
All right, great.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night. Oh, we're late for our public hearing.
And actually, for our public hearing, I don't see the license owner on the line. But I'm going to announce that if Sergey is on the line, perhaps he could raise his hand, just in case I'm not seeing his name properly, or it's another name on the screen. There is a raise your hand button at the center bottom of the screen. Did notify him at this point I don't know how the board would like to handle it. We should, if the board, unless the board wishes to defer it, we should certainly open the hearing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should
Open it.
open it. We discussed this, I believe, back in
January 13th.
January,
Yep.
right?
6 months, if we gave
Yeah.
it 6
And then
months.
maybe we can just recap to bring Matthew up to speed.
I actually watched that. I remember watching
Okay,
that,
all
that
right.
meeting where you had the initial conversation about the license, so I think I've read through, I think I know what's going on.
Okay, great.
So I would recommend a motion that the hearing for Utica Incorporated DBA Fallon's Wine and Spirits liquor license to consider cancellation under Mass General Law, Chapter 138, Section 77 be opened.
So moved.
Second.
Okay,
Sorry, I keep jumping the, we don't have to click. Pause, right?
okay, great. So the motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Knox?
Yo.
Mr. DeCoste?
Yes.
Mr. Nordhaus?
Yes.
And Cindy Napoli is yes, so.
I just,
Public
Marla,
hearing.
appreciate you being here, but your presence is having our Assistant Town Administrator hang in the hall, because but it is a closed meeting.
All right.
With just the board being here. If you,
Bye, Bartlett.
thank you.
Thanks for coming.
I'll email you, Bartlett.
I thought it was 7, but Nina said 6, or Joe said 6.
I thought it was 8 in
It's
this
six.
It
room.
was 8.
It's, well, it's 8 per
Oh, you're good.
1,000 square feet. This room has about 800 square feet, so it's prorated down to 6.
Oh, I thought it was a little, I thought this room was a little bit bigger. I thought we could squeeze 7. but-
Well, if we cheat and we include the bathrooms and the rooms back there, but then you have to add Mark to the list, and
Yeah.
So in this public
Okay.
hearing, where do we go from here?
Okay.
Madam Chair.
So, Nina, if you would like just to provide a brief summary, we,
Sure, I'd be glad to. So the board has, as you all know, the board discussed this matter on January 13th and gave the applicant, the current license holder, Sergey Sajayevich, 6 months to either sell or open another business. I guess I'm supposed to move my pointer somewhere. Hopefully that worked. At this point in time, Mr. Sajayevich has not been able to propose or identify a sale for his liquor license. In speaking with him last week and bringing this to his attention that the board wished to, and discussing this hearing tonight, he indicated that based on the pandemic, he hasn't had the opportunity to go through the process. I asked that he attend the meeting this evening, and I'm not sure if it's a matter of technical difficulties, but I don't see him on the line. Again, if Sergey, Mr. Sajayevich is on the line, if you could please raise your hand so that we know that you're there and can bring you into the meeting.
so really what's before us is we can,
You can extend the time period, or you can vote to cancel the license.
If we cancel the license, is it then available to someone else in town?
at our discretion.
At our discretion, okay. Someone would have to apply for it and we would approve, is that correct?
Pretty much.
Okay.
yeah.
So under the circumstances, I would have no problem extending it for another, I don't know, not 6 months, but for another time frame, because we have no one else that's jumped up and said, I would like to open this in that area. Obviously, we were trying to spread them out and not have them all located at the common.
Right.
But we haven't had that person come forward yet, or he hasn't found someone to come forward yet, so. In my mind, I don't have a problem extending 3 months or something like that, so he can try to find something.
I wouldn't mind doing like 60 days and get through the summer. That way he has a reasonable opportunity, given the pandemic. But I think, to Matthew's point, if we put the license back into our back pocket, if someone does want to open up somewhere, I don't know, it's
Yeah,
available to them.
I agree. I think 60 days or some period of time is reasonable. I do think this is an, unexpected situation for him to try to sell a liquor store in the middle of the pandemic. And you know,
Bike shop seems to be
Well,
killing it, though.
So just to recap, he originally this license was proposed to be transferred to Littleton Convenience. That was back in October. And then he came back to us in January. You know, so here we are now in July. So, I mean,
so we're talking about almost a year now.
Yeah.
Kick the can a bit.
Yeah.
the can't, so I mean, if we, you know, that's the board's favor, I don't have any problem with it if we want to extend through the end of the summer, but at that point, I would just say we need to act on it.
Yeah, I agree, 60 days would be
Reasonable?
Yeah,
With no more extensions
no
after
more
that.
extensions, right.
although I am concerned that he didn't show up tonight, if that's,
In some way, shape, or form,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
And I don't know
Well,
if there's a technology challenge, I don't know.
That's kind of where one of the reasons I feel somewhat of an obligation to allow him the opportunity to reach out to us and say, I tried getting on, and the Zoom thing didn't work.
Yeah.
You said you spoke to him this week?
I
And
spoke
he-
to him last week,
And
yeah.
he confirmed that he was
He
gonna be here?
confirmed, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so we'll extend it for 60 days. And you could maybe reach back out
Happy
to
to.
him.
So just continue the meeting, the hearing?
Yes, I would recommend, well, you could do it one of two different ways. I suppose you could continue the hearing, or you could vote to insert a number of months into this motion the way we had done it previously. I think either would be fine.
I think you can say, it's already been opened, it's been duly advertised.
We just need
I
a
think it's-
date, time, and location certain, yep. So, I mean, we could look at our September meetings. We have a 14th, 21st, and 28th meeting. I suppose September 14th would be almost exactly.
Falls right in,
Yeah.
Okay,
so.
So there could be a motion that the board vote to continue the hearing for Utica
Udacha,
Incorporated,
DBA
DBA,
Founds,
yep, you got it.
Wine and Spirits, to September 14th, 2020, at 8 PM.
To consider cancellation.
Consider cancellation of said liquor license.
Second.
motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Knox?
yes.
Mr. DeCoste?
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus?
Yes.
And Cindy Napoli is yes. Okay,
And just if someone could just reach out to him again proactively and say, hey, was there a problem?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
okay. Do you need a motion to close the hearing?
Maybe we
No.
continued it.
No, we just continued it, perfect. Okay, all right, next on the agenda are board and committee appointments. Continued discussion on any remaining appointments?
Yes.
Point 'em all.
Sorry?
I said appoint them all.
Okay. So under appointments for, Madam Chair, if I may,
Sure.
go through, we did have a submission for a tax aid committee, a person who would be interested in tax aid committee, that's Lacia Shanjenko, if I said that correctly. I believe Lacia may be on the line right now. Or at least I thought I saw her earlier. Nevertheless, there is a candidate for Taxation Aid Committee, and perhaps we walk through these one by one because they're so varied from one another.
I was just looking for her submission.
It's the first one.
Mm.
76. 77, sorry.
Finding it.
Get a little scroll, the little tiles down the bottom, and jump into.
I got it.
Sorry. Nope.
So I appreciate her applying to this committee. I was gonna ask her how she learned about it, if she was on the call, but it looks like she has great experience. She's retired, she's got some time, and she wanted to serve on the committee. She's got a great background in finance. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't appoint her. And that's the final open slot on the taxation committee, correct?
I could pull that up, but I don't have that immediately in front of me.
One of the things I meant to do too was just to have it like a description about what the committee is and their charge, just because I think a lot of people at home might not be familiar with what the committee does, but I didn't get to do that. So, does the board have any comments? I mean, I think it's wonderful that she wants to volunteer and participate. I don't see any reason whatsoever that we wouldn't appoint her, so,
She seems eminently qualified.
yeah.
She got all the time in the world.
That wouldn't.
That sold me.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Remember that. Okay, so we ready for a motion?
Move the select board vote to appoint Lesia Sayenko to the Taxation Aid Committee for a term expiring June 30th, 2024.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste? Mr. Nordhaus?
Yes.
And Cindy Napoli is yes. Nina or Joe, if you could just follow up with her and just let her know she needs to go get sworn in by the town clerk, that would be wonderful. And what do we have next? Who do we have next?
So the other two I wanted to bring to the board's attention was MART Advisory Board and Magic position. For the MART Advisory Board, the board has one appointment there, and for the Magic, there's two representatives from the community. One is a planning board representative, one is a Board of Selectmen representative. Those two are out there. We could include those on an advertisement if the board wished, unless the board has an idea of candidates who would be of interest to the board. Perhaps the board would like staff to do it. I think there's a number of different options.
So I think Keith historically did sit on the MART board. I don't know what kind of time he's got on his hands, but I don't even know what requirements we have as far as residency. But I would love to see someone from whether somebody that worked for the MBTA and is retired, or someone that worked for Regional Transit Authority. That would be fantastic to have that level of expertise and subject matter
Right.
or knowledge, you know? So I'd prefer that we advertise for it. If we need to put somebody in there, do you know if they have anything going on over the summer?
I know they have meetings on a regular basis.
So if somebody
Probably
needed to step
monthly.
in, I mean, I'd be willing to jump in on like when Matthew
Is Keith
relieved
still
me on the
serving
Housing
on that?
Authority.
Keith serves on the,
Magic.
he doesn't serve Magic, he's our MAPC representative.
Okay. I was just, who was the previous appointee?
For the MART board was Anthony Ansaldi.
It was Anthony, okay.
So we've been underrepresented for a while then,
Basically.
essentially.
Okay, all right, so we'll put that out for advertisement. I like the idea of getting someone.
Unless, if Anthony and Keith have historically been the representatives, does
Oh.
it make sense for one of you to serve on that?
At the board's pleasure.
Okay, perfect.
Well, I mean, if it's something that's not gonna fit your schedule or your expertise, I mean, there's gotta be some synergy there. So if it doesn't work, then we can, put our feelers out, and like I said, I'd step up and do it on a very interim basis
Right.
with an aggressive
So,
approach to recruit somebody to take my
Right.
place.
It's not gonna work twice.
yeah,
Well played.
night's still young, Matthew. So what do you think? Do you have any interest?
I'm happy to do it. Do you
Yeah,
want to
I
do it?
I mean, on any of those, at least I have my planning background, so.
Oh, okay. All right. That sounds good.
You comfortable with it, Joe?
Yeah.
Nina, does that work for you?
Fine. Okay. All right, great. So,
Want to do it like on a one-year basis and just
1 year I would recommend, yeah. I believe for some reason it tells me that that's a 1 year.
okay.
am I doing this?
Or at least because we did it for 1 year last time.
Okay.
More than anything.
Move the select board vote to appoint Joseph Layden to a term on the MART Advisory Board for a term expiring June 30th, 2021, one-year term.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. DeCoste?
I'm in favor.
Mr. Nordhaus?
Yes.
Cindy Napoli is yes. Congratulations, Joe.
Tell your family we're sorry.
Okay, and so next on the list is the Magic Minuteman Advisory Group.
And Nina, have you been serving on that?
I haven't
Yeah.
yet.
Oh, okay.
Is that working?
Yeah, more recently, it's been a little bit challenging to get to the meetings, given the pandemic, but a lot of it's obviously virtual at this point. There's just been so many conflicting meetings over other meetings. But happy to continue to serve on that if the board would like.
Okay.
Follow the pleasure of the board.
I think it makes sense for somebody from your office to do it.
Right.
If you need support from one of us, you know, if, I don't even know if that's, would they allow that? Like if you were unable to do so, can Joe step in your stead or?
Good, he just wouldn't be able to be voting.
Right,
Mhm.
okay.
All right.
Move the select board vote to appoint Nina Nazarian to a term on the Magic.
I'll just say due for 1 year at this point, just because I don't know what the
Or-
term was.
Term expiring June 30th, 2021.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste?
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus?
Yes.
And Cindy Napoli is aye.
Great.
Okay, excellent. Next, we are on to Park and Recreation Commission elected official.
Yes.
So
So the step here is that based on the way that the election occurred, there were let me pull up Diane's email. Essentially, there was Mr. Kevin Matrano won the same number of seats for the 3-year term as he did for the 1-year term. Mr. Matrano was asked to select which election he chose to accept, so he accepted the 3-year term. And then he was,
Written in for the,
right,
so he can't hold two seats on the
that's
same
right.
committee.
And I think I may have the terms may be mixed up. I don't know if he took the 3-year term or if
There
he
was a
took the
letter in
1-year
the,
term. Nevertheless, there's a seat now that's open, and it ultimately is one that the Board of Selectmen can appoint with a suggestion from the Park and Rec Commission. In order to get this underway, I would recommend advertising the position, and the question becomes, does the board wish to advertise the position consistent with its policies? Does the board wish to deviate from its policies for any number of reasons that you may want to consider that, whether it's the fact that you'd like to have them have as full of a board as possible, I'm just thinking out of the box, describing the nuances of how you may wish to go through your considerations on this.
I don't think we deviate, just stick with it, they can operate.
So 4-week advertisement is kind of what I wanted to bring up.
Maybe we do deviate. It's 4 weeks during the summer, I don't think it's, that's my opinion.
yeah, I know.
Go with
However
the standard for
board would
now.
like to do it.
Plus, I think we already have it written down as, as such.
Okay. Yeah, like you said, it's summertime. I don't think it's worth,
And it would, so
Posting
somebody
it
filling
now.
out that the 1-year term, which would expire in May of '21, right? At the
That's-
election, because it's an elected position,
Yeah, that's a great point, yeah, it would only be through the next election.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say we duly advertise it, and if for some reason the Park and Rec Commission comes to us and says, we've got somebody, actually, once we advertise it, it's, the toothpaste is out of the tube, so that's what we gotta go with, and they can have that person attend those meetings but not take a vote, just to come up to speed.
So were there any other write-in votes? And could we offer it to them before we advertise?
I would recommend advertising from a policy standpoint. But there may have been others who were write-in candidates, and we can certainly, if the board would like to find out who those candidates were, assuming there were some, we can certainly notify all of the write-in candidates to consider applying.
I know people wrote in, I know there were several.
yeah, I
write-in
was gonna
people.
say, I do,
I heard
yeah, I did too.
about some campaigns to do it, so.
Right. Yeah, I think there was more than one write-in.
Yeah.
I want to say there might have been 3.
So, I mean, I would think, yeah, well, can we notify them and ask them if they're interested?
Right.
I'd still recommend the advertisement process.
Sure,
but
okay.
We could still notify them, and it's just a matter of how many weeks you want to advertise for, and I think that really, who we notify and reaching out to people to see if they're interested, certainly can do that.
Can we reach out to them before we advertise?
Certainly, yeah.
Or,
Just to save some
we
money?
can certainly do that, but, well, we have, no matter what, we have to advertise, right?
I don't think it's been your practice not to advertise.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any scenario where you haven't advertised. The only thing I'm aware of is that you've chosen to reduce the number of weeks of advertisement or not put it in the newspaper. So I think that's where the prior actions have been.
So
And-
advertise, but
fill-
not publish it in the newspaper,
Right.
but still
Well,
advertise.
and part of the issue there is, I think there was a statement that was made that the newspaper probably generates the least number of readers
Definitely
versus
does.
our website or our social
Right,
media.
so, okay,
So perhaps waiving the newspaper publication and discussion on the number of weeks in which you advertise is all in, I think, well within the appropriate steps. I don't know, unless you were to have a broader discussion on not advertising and perhaps looking at statutes and seeing, and perhaps even asking counsel about opportunities, because positions typically need to be advertised, then I wouldn't, before we do that, I wouldn't recommend not advertising.
If we can satisfy the policy and just not advertise in the newspaper,
agree.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that's like 99% of what
Yeah.
we need.
right.
Yeah.
So
The-
why don't we just do that?
Plus the fact that we do know that other people were
Interested,
interested
right.
and had done a write-in.
Yeah.
So I would say, that being said, let's cut it down to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, and then if we can get them appointed within the 4-week period, we're a little
So
bit ahead.
notify all write-ins, advertise for 2 weeks, and we will also
Not
not put it in the newspaper.
Right.
Right.
Now, the 2-week, not to get so detailed, do you want to be a couple days short of 2 weeks so that you can consider the appointment at the next meeting? Or would you like to
Stick with
just?
2 weeks, and then it'll just, the appointment would happen at our
2
subsequent.
meetings from today?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thanks. Assume everyone's comfortable with that since I'm not getting any,
Yeah. Okay,
okay, that's the next item. Jumping down, if I may, Madam Chair?
sure.
Conservation Commission Associate Member. This evening, the Conservation Commission voted to appoint Ms. Anna Mayer as an associate member, but that is subject to the board's approval and confirmation, and so there is a motion that is crafted in the revised packet to include that the board could vote to confirm the Conservation Commission's appointment of Anna Mayer as an associate member of the commission in accordance with the town bylaws.
So moved.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste?
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus?
Yes.
City Napoli is yes. Excellent.
Great, thank you. As far as remaining board and committee vacancies, we have still some remaining on Clean Lakes, specifically the Spectacle Pond alternate, the Citizen at Large, and then the Littleton Common Committee. I thought we filled all the seats on the Littleton Common Committee.
I thought there were 4 applicants and 4 seats.
Are we mixing this up with the
Revitalization?
revitalization?
Yeah,
conversation?
yeah, with the smart sewer common,
Mhm.
yeah, I think
Right.
we're mixing it up.
I'll look into that one a little further, and the Sustainability Committee. So, I mean, perhaps we add these to the advertisement we put out?
Yeah.
And just bundle it up together.
Yep.
Okay. Then the last piece under this item is select board seats on other boards and committees. As you can see on the second page on the cover sheet of this packet item, there are seats that are held by select board members currently, and it's my understanding that those don't typically change unless there is a change noted, such as the last meeting where Joe Knox indicated he'd be willing to come off the personnel board, and Paul Glavy accepted that opening. The only item we have before us that doesn't have a select board member represented is the MPIC, the Master Plan Implementation Committee, because obviously Chase Gerbig did not run for reelection.
Right. So,
Trying to think of who we could have.
oh, well, hold that thought, hold that thought. So one of the things I was gonna ask is about the Transportation Advisory Council, maybe stepping off of that.
I can think of someone too.
So that was one that I was interested in maybe
Moving away from.
moving away from.
Well, where Paul's the alternate, do we want to see if, or I mean, if you want the transportation, you're here, so.
I would volunteer for that too, if Matthew doesn't want to do it.
I'm not up on transportation. I actually was interested in the Ag Lands Working Group.
Okay. 'Cause Paul and I are on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to trade another one off, as it were, I would definitely do that one.
Okay. I actually like the Ag
okay.
Lands Working Group.
Paul has historically as well.
Okay.
And the other one too.
I won't let anybody step in at the Affordable Housing Trust but you.
Yeah, I know, yeah. That's my
You put a ton of
baby.
time into that, so.
Yeah. And the Cultural Council reached out to me too. I guess I'm their liaison.
Really?
Yeah,
Nice.
which I'm gonna continue with that.
Well, would you,
Well, we still have master plan.
yeah, so the MPIC, and, I mean, we all kind of wear different hats, right? I'm somewhat the liaison to Park and Rec as well. So,
Right.
and schools, but. Well, how about this? Matthew, give that some consideration. I mean, frankly, none of us were up on most of the boards and committees that, we jumped in. I mean, certainly Ag, you've got.
You know what, the transportation, it's a great group, because it's comprised of all different, boards and the town employees. Like, you learn a lot going to those meetings about what's going on around town. I enjoy that. I'm just trying to simplify and, streamline what I'm focusing on, so.
Well, I think if you're not ready to commit to that tonight, Matthew, I'd say that maybe we table that for tonight.
Yeah.
And you okay staying there until, Paul comes in and he can step up from the alt position?
Yep,
Yeah,
if he wants
I'll
to.
consider too. It would be great to have this conversation again in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And springing it on you.
Actually, if we do our goals meeting too, that may
Right.
also align
Shed
with
some
some of
light.
these, so.
Right.
Let's do that first.
And there was another one too I was
MPIC.
thinking of. Yeah,
Master plan?
Master plan and
Transportation.
transportation, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so give those some consideration, I'd say.
okay. All right, so we'll revisit this when Paul's here. Okay,
I think that's it, Nina, right?
Yeah.
all right, and so now
Excuse me.
we are actually on to,
Item 8. Town administrator?
yeah, town administrator, right? Yep. Item 8, great.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a special town meeting timeline in the packet, and I drafted this timeline consistent with most recent historical town meeting timelines, assuming a 7 PM gym at the middle school, but I did this for illustrative purposes and thought that there may be benefit to having a discussion about whether or not we'd like to see it be outdoors. If it is outdoors, then we may want to consider moving it up. This schedule will give you a sense of how moving it up, would, right,
It's gonna
moving it
shift,
up,
yeah.
exactly. And so, right now, if we were to adopt this today and set a special town meeting for October 26th, whether that was indoors or outdoors, the date in which voter petitions to amend zoning would have to be submitted would be later this month, which the time frame is pretty tight on.
Be a short meeting.
Yeah, I guess that, but I do know that we're anticipating I don't want to say a number of road acceptances, but we are anticipating some developers who are looking to bring forward road acceptances. So that would be an impact there. And so the question becomes, how do we want to do this? The later we have it, the harder it may be to have an outdoor town meeting. And so, I mean, again, here we are stuck, here you all are, and I'm happy to be stuck with you, but stuck in a difficult decision-making position where we have to decide how early we want to hold town meeting and how that will affect the ability to get some work done because it may not meet the cutoffs versus pushing it back, which would affect our potential ability to hold it outdoors as we anticipate we will likely still be in a pandemic.
Right. Yeah, we lucked out with the weather with the last town meeting.
Yeah, we did.
Can you imagine we're gonna be not lucky twice, but,
Littleton in a snowstorm.
right?
Caps on.
I mean, people do go to football games in those,
Yeah, that's
not
true.
anymore, but,
We wearing our cheese heads and
but it's a little bit different when you're attending a sporting game.
Right.
yeah. I think we're going to have to, keep some level of flux. I mean, but if we're going to have it sooner, then we're kind of like, to your point, we have to kind of tighten things up and get articles, at least in draft form.
Right.
And I mean, if we were to try to keep October, let's say we were to try to do Saturday, the 24th, for instance. Perhaps there's a way we can abbreviate down these other pieces in a way that collapses it. If we have, I'm not aware of any, unless we're talking about a smart sewer proposal, I'm not aware of any other very, very large topic that's coming our way.
Yeah.
So, perhaps one of the things we do is check with LELWD to see what their timing, where their timing is in terms of that
That's a good idea.
project. And try to see how we can fit these things together. If they're not targeting for some reason this fall town meeting, then I don't think it's as important for us to be later. If they are targeting this fall town meeting, obviously, that's gonna be a substantial part of the conversation,
Right.
perhaps the meeting, and for that reason, we'd wanna probably
Right.
get it.
And, right, and one of the things that we need to talk about with Littleton Station too is, are we gonna try to at least bring the final
Renderings,
renderings forward, just to, show them to the town? or
non-binding,
Just to give the residents a glimpse of, what we've put together, so, in that report, so we're meeting next week on that, so
23rd.
yeah, the 23rd, so we can make a decision then about whether or not, that's something that we're planning for fall town meeting. But it's a great idea to follow up with sewer. Trying to think of, what else might be coming.
Senior center, potentially.
The senior center potentially.
Maybe a little hiccup in that RFQ process that we'll have to look at some
Right.
further, but. Then we have the Tehadawon land, and then we're anticipating the zoning bylaw amendment for 5G as well. So those are the major things on my radar at this
Okay.
point. I'm sure there are others that
Right.
I just don't have jotted down here, but.
So we should have more information potentially by our next meeting. Just as far as, I think, with everything we just discussed, right?
Yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, are you thinking if there's nothing controversial, we can hold it inside?
No, just as far as time frame goes. If the sewer commissioners need a certain time frame to
Yeah.
put together what they're putting together, if Littleton Station needs some extra time, and want to bring something together, and then with the senior center as well, so, that will dictate whether it will be later in October or earlier.
Or in the spring.
Or in the spring.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
And that might, just based upon all that's happened, it might be more prudent to, for the smart sewer, that might be more prudent to
Might be, yeah.
kick it out yet again,
Mm-hmm.
depending upon where we're at with it.
right.
Or any one of those, really.
Yeah, exactly. Okay,
Okay, so how would the board like to handle the piece about the deadline for voter petitions? One way to handle it is accept the special town meeting timeline as presented with the understanding so that the deadlines start getting set and so we can
Cascading.
notify people, and then amending it with an understanding that we plan to amend it. That's one option. I'm mindful that the first deadline is July 28th.
It's
right,
like 2 weeks from now.
okay.
So,
I don't even know if that's a realistic deadline for various developers, but at least it would hopefully add to their understanding that time is of the essence.
so it says per policy, that's our policy,
It is,
and so we can
yes.
play with the policy if need be.
Right.
You know, extend it 2 weeks, or
Yep.
say, well, it was the 28th, and that's it, it was the 28th. And we needed to set something, so we said it. Okay, so although we may not meet the 90-day per policy, we gave it our best effort.
Right, I mean, a similar situation was presented more recently with regard to a citizen's petition over the summer, in fact. Was it? I believe it was that citizen's petition, because I believe there was a language along those lines, but nevertheless, we accepted the fact that it was still something we needed to act on and took up the subject matter. So yes, you do have the flexibility.
Okay.
So I guess is our advice to Nina to go under the understanding that this is what we're shooting for? Yeah.
Well, it really depends on, we're looking at that July 28th deadline.
Sort of.
Otherwise, we could wait till our next meeting
Mhm.
to discuss this. It's really just the July 28th deadline that's pushing the urgency right now, but like you just said, we can
fluff it either way.
we can fluff it either way, right? And our next meeting is
2 weeks from today, the 27th, if I'm not mistaken?
27th, so,
So yeah, I mean, in that case, worst case scenario, you would have to take off 14 days from the 90 days, and then you'd be in the same time frame.
Well, we decide tonight that the deadline is
X.
August 5th.
Yep, correct. I mean, I really think that that's really the only decision-making point at this time, if we want to continue discussion on, get more information from, stakeholders, maybe send out an inquiry to, all boards, committees, and employees, department heads, to see what's on their radar and what they're expecting and get some feedback.
right.
Then the only real decision-making point is probably giving the planning office some knowledge of when, voter petitions should be submitted to amend zoning.
Okay.
When have we historically let folks know, may not know the answer to this, but when have we let folks know when we need that voter petition? Because they have to go out and they need to get the signatures, they need to get 100 signatures, so, in fairness to anyone that does wish to bring forth a petition, I haven't heard any rumblings.
I
about
haven't
it.
either. That's what's gonna be my next question.
Didn't hear a word. Yeah. Have we, we want to be fair about it and give people the opportunity to bring it forward if they're going to bring it forward. But, if we decided to do it tonight, we're basically giving them 2 weeks to get their signatures and bring forth a voter petition, if we stick with that as the deadline.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Is that fair? Is it 14
I know.
days?
I don't know what
Then-
it's been historically. I don't know when I could
Honestly,
certainly look back.
I think this is sooner than I ever remember it, but
Okay.
it's just
Right.
because it's upon us right now, so I've never really given it a whole lot of consideration,
Mm-hmm.
because typically the date's set and we
Right, not a lot of movement.
move forward, yeah.
Well, perhaps the simplest thing to do is, when we come back at our July 27th meeting, we just take a close look at that item and we set another date. and have a discussion on what's a reasonable period of time. And I'll collect some more information to that end on, you know, perhaps if there have been changes in the past to that number of days and what, I mean, the board's policy does have specific language in there about why it does need that level of notice, and because there's a prescription on the process of the planning board's involvement and their hearing. But perhaps I can collect some more information and get to the heart of why we have that 90-day policy.
Okay.
What if,
Just as far as just reviewing it, because the board has 14 days to refer to the planning board has to hold a hearing within 65 days. It basically just
compresses everything?
It is possible as far as, because the planning board isn't necessarily held to that, you can compress it with the understanding that it does really sort of confine the planning board in the amount of time that it has to then prepare its necessary reports. And depending on what happens, if the planning board doesn't prepare a report for town meeting can't consider it. So many towns, in my previous towns, I've never even had a limit established by the board of selectmen to provide zoning articles. So it probably is something, I was just looking through the regulations to see what the process would be to amend it. But because we're still living under a different COVID-19 time, by the time October comes, you could probably establish a rationale for relaxing things, even if it was by 10 days or 14 days.
What if we did this? The 28th of July is a Tuesday. We don't meet again until, so we meet the 27th, then we meet August 10th, right?
27th, August 10th, yep.
So what if we just bumped it out a week from the 28th and made it August 4th for citizen petitions? I mean, it's as good as any other date, I guess. You know, it gives folks that extra week, in fairness, to try to, it shortens our time period if we do stay with this date by a week. So it's really on us, not on them. We're taking time away from us to get stuff together than we are to a petitioner, potential petitioner. I'm just throwing that out there as a possible wiggle.
That's fine.
We'll just go with that.
Yeah, let's just go with that.
Okay, so we'll publish that. And is there any specific, are there specific dates that the board wants us to look at in terms of, or is there any sense of where in the calendar you'd like to see a town meeting? I mean, my guess would be as early as departments who really want to reach a fall town meeting can make it, right? Is that a fair statement?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Typically, finance has typically driven that bus for us, based upon when they get the numbers from the state,
Yep.
right?
right.
Well, and in this case, my impression is that it's gonna be really about the tax rate classification hearing, and
Didn't we just do that?
Yeah,
so we don't wanna be, I don't anticipate a scenario of us leaning up against the tax rate classification hearing. If anything, I think we'd be more inclined to wanna try to do it earlier in October, because I don't see a scenario where recommending a November town meeting would be productive for getting the tax classification hearing completed, setting the tax rate, and getting all the tax bills out in a timely fashion. That would be very difficult. So I think we're talking about, you know, bookending this at the end of October and moving forward. Would it be fair to assume that the board's preference would be to get town meeting done as soon as conceivably possible to capitalize on good weather? The best we can predict such a thing?
That's one school of thought. Another school of thought is the national election is on November 3rd, so we could try to do it like on the 31st, Halloween. That's a great day for town meeting.
I think we should probably have a couple alternate days,
Yeah, I think
because
we
if we're gonna do it outside and it's snowing or sleeting,
Oh, yes.
we'll wanna pick a different one. So maybe we have 2 weekends, we have the 24th and the 31st, and the option of both days, I don't, you know, on each weekend.
The weekend of the 31st, essentially, the tarp's already gonna be down in the middle school if it is an indoor town meeting, if it's indoor. Because it'll be down for the election, typically it goes down over the weekend. Just thinking of those logistics, optimistically that we're going to be able to have town meeting indoors.
I mean, I guess,
But to Matthew's point, if we are gonna have it outside, the weather definitely plays a factor, so if the
Right.
24th is an ice storm.
absolutely. Well, I mean, what we're seeing right now is the same conversation, I think, or a similar conversation to the conversation we were having at the start of planning for a town meeting in the spring.
Right.
It's probably gonna take a number of different conversations to figure out how the logistics are gonna line up. You know, perhaps we know a little bit more today than we did back then, and we're able to set dates, and really, we have got some tried and true things, hopefully, that will be a little bit less work in the setting and then resetting and then setting and resetting
I mean-
process we went through.
Right. I think personally, we just need to plan to have it outdoors. I can't imagine,
That would be sooner in October. I think the 24th is kind of the
I
outer limit.
think instead of, going back through the whole process of having it indoor, I think we already determined people aren't comfortable having it indoors. I don't think that we're gonna be any better off in October than we are right now as far as social distancing and whatnot.
And we've seen, not only have, we had a successful town meeting. So we've got a lot of best demonstrated practices that came out of that.
Right.
But so have a number of other communities, and we can learn from them as well. There's a lot of best demonstrated practices, and many of them put tents up. So how did the tent work out? Where did you get it from? What did it cost
Yeah,
you? So,
so-
so we can learn from a
That's a
lot of
good
those
point,
communities as
Right.
well.
So does the board have a general consensus of an outdoor town, because that really helps us
Yeah,
begin the
I
planning
think we
process.
just, I think we just,
We'll do it.
yeah, exactly. I
I think
think,
we have to go outdoors.
yeah.
Yeah,
I just-
outdoors,
Instead of going back
That
and
really gives
forth.
me a good, solid way to begin thinking about next steps and
Yeah.
coming back with some more concrete options.
And I think we really, barring any requests or scheduling issues with respect to larger initiatives that might be coming forward, like the sewer project or whatnot, that they're gonna say, hey, we need a couple extra weeks. I think we try to plan it for earlier in October. And just outdoors and
17,
yeah, and just,
'cause the weekend before that is Columbus Day /
Indigenous
right, just
Peoples'
like,
Day.
like the 17th.
Okay, so 24th or 17th is basically what we've targeted, right?
Yeah.
And is there any reason you wouldn't want to do 17th and 18th and then 24th and 25th, or are you just shooting for Saturdays specifically? Does it make a difference?
Well, I would guess with rentals, you probably don't want to do 2 weekends. You want to do 1 weekend. Right, like if we're renting a tent,
Yeah.
it's more expensive to rent it for
And a floor and
10
chairs and
days than for
heaters.
2 days.
Right.
So if we have an alternate, if we have Saturday and an alternative Sunday, it would be more cost effective than trying to plan for 2 full weekends,
Right.
even though I said that earlier.
Unless, in talking to other communities, they had an insurance policy with the
Right.
rental
Oh,
company.
well, that's a good
Sure.
point, actually.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
but
Thought
at
of
least
that
we've
either.
got the flexibility. You're not saying no to a Sunday. You're saying,
I'm not crazy about a Sunday, I'll
Okay.
definitely tell you that. I don't like.
Yeah, so
I
let's,
think it's,
right,
you know,
let's shoot for
family
the
day and
Saturday.
okay.
Whether you're religious or not.
Right, and, it
So
worked well on
preference,
Alumni
yeah.
Field, so.
Maybe a little later this time. I wonder, like later in the day, like 10 instead of 8.
Well, you're not gonna be dealing with the late.
Because it was early because of the
basically, it's
heat.
The heat,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
the sun, you're not.
Yeah, because that turf
In
gets
theory, you're not
hot,
gonna-
that's why it was so early. But yeah, in the fall, we won't have to worry about that, so,
Okay,
yeah.
talking about an 11 a.m. start?
Yeah, something
Sure.
like that.
10.
Yeah, no,
decide that later.
I'm thinking, we have no idea what's gonna happen with the fall sports, so I'm trying to think
That's
if
the
there
other
is a
issue, yeah.
Friday night soccer or football game,
Right.
it would limit setup time.
Yeah, actually, we need to take that into
Coordinate.
consideration, because who knows what's planned for that day on that field.
Right.
Okay,
So for now, I've got the 17th, 18th, 24th, 25th preference on Saturdays. Start a little later,
But
coordinate
if
with.
we give those dates now to Mike Lynn and
yeah, we need to give them to
by
school
some
now.
crazy
luck
football
that
ends
they
up
are
happening, luck,
actually able
yeah,
to-
exactly, I don't know what word to put in there, my son's probably watching, but, if they do end up playing games, we could have Mike request an away game that week or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if, maybe. It's because I think the schedule is so messed up now that it's
Right,
maybe the opportunity to
okay.
make changes.
Okay, thank you for walking through that with me.
Does that have any impact on the date that we just set for August 4th, or just leave it alone?
I mean, it certainly tightens it, and, you know, I mean, to Joe's point, I think the only position that puts the town in is that the planning board may receive notification of a petition that they,
Have to take action on.
well, they don't have to take action on by the time town meeting passes. That's the interesting thing.
Oh,
Because
I
the
see,
60,
yes.
they have to take action within
65 days.
days. And it could be that the 59th through the 65th day is the days after town meeting. And so that's the challenge. And this did come up when we had the petition for taking retail marijuana off the table, if you recall. And the planning board was in that very same position. They didn't have the necessary 65 days, so they could have said, well, I'm sorry, we just didn't get to it. And then it would have been kind of a pocket veto, so to speak. But they chose to go
Take
through it and take action. I don't want to speak for the planning board, but I would imagine that they would try to do what they could, understanding we're in a pandemic and,
So we're talking about a voter petition to amend zoning?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, what's the likelihood of that happening?
I mean, we haven't heard anything
Haven't
anytime
heard
soon,
anything at
anytime
all.
recently.
Yeah.
Back when we were discussing marijuana, there was certainly a lot of discussion,
Yeah, but nothing, well, all right, so I think we're good with what we've, I know it's
So,
tight, but,
well, same question, though. Do we want to slide it back to 7/28 in the event that?
that's hard for me to, I mean, I'm not hearing anything right now that would suggest that there would be a need to do that. And I mean, you all know the planning board members best, and you've worked with them longer. If you feel that they would be willing to work within a smaller time frame, if necessary, then I think we're okay. But it's really probably more of a question for the planning board.
so what,
Just leave it alone.
yeah, let's just leave it alone for now.
Okay, that sums up that item.
Okay,
The next item, I'm going to defer to Joe because he's been working more closely on the Harvest Club item.
Oh, and I will recuse myself for this. And actually the two after it as well, I think.
We knew where to find you.
Come get me when you're done.
Joe looked like he had a nice office set up out there, so.
Actually, I'm gonna roll one of those up. I've always wanted a standing desk. I'm just gonna take one of those voter things.
Oh, there
and
you
just-
go.
That's where,
Yeah.
I'm like, there's great light in the hallway. It's perfect. Okay, so,
You good with this? Have you been dealing with Chris?
Yes.
Since it's come in? Okay.
Yep.
All right, 'cause-
so I mean, it's a rather minor change. It's basically specifying that they're also gonna be doing some processing and manufacturing.
yeah, I got it. I mean, it's
Otherwise, there was
intimately
nothing else
involved with it.
that
so-
changed.
The only other change other than that, Joe, is they had above and beyond the HCA payment, they wanted to include a community benefit payment.
okay,
And they asked us where we'd like that community benefit payment to go. It was a $5,000 donation. And so we went back and forth trying to determine whether or not we wanted to pick something or just say at the full discretion of the board. So we left it blank for us to determine where we'd like to put that 5,000. It's almost like the cell tower,
Right.
money. We put it into housing trust, or, there's any number of things we could put it into, or we could put it into.
do we need to decide tonight?
Can we just put it into an account and we use that money where we need it? And
We could change the language to be at the full discretion of the board. But
Yeah, I'm just trying to think.
we kind of went back and forth and deliberated,
Off the top of my
Chris and I
head.
deliberated back and forth as to what would be the best way to do
Well,
it.
I'm trying to think of, I mean, could we do like the Shade Tree Committee, or could we do, something like that, like some of the smaller committees that we appoint that don't really have a big budget?
So just so you guys know where I'm talking about, it's under 3D in the actual agreement. community benefit payment. The company shall pay to the town a community benefit payment in the sum of $5,000 annually for the term of the agreement. The town may use the above referenced payment as it deems appropriate in its sole discretion, but shall make a good faith effort to allocate said payments for purposes of supporting the, and so it's really not necessarily, it's supporting the education of drug use, or it could be mental health, or seniors, or, you know,
Okay.
that would give us a little more latitude if we picked more of a category. Joe, is this how you discussed it with Chris as well?
Yes.
Community benefit payment shall be based on the calendar year with the payment side just gets into when it gets paid.
Supporting the, okay.
We had a bunch of iterations, so it's just trying to give us some latitude so that it doesn't have to specifically be,
So does it have to go to the same?
I think that's what my point
It
was.
looks the way it's worded, like it needs to go to the same
well,
entity.
so if we put the word seniors in there, or supporting the Department of Elder and Human Services, or Littleton Police Department for the education of youth in drugs, or, you know, we can, this is where we have some
Okay.
latitude to change it. We can change it, Joe, to say, the town shall make, the town may use the above referenced payments as it deems appropriate in its sole discretion.
I just leave it there.
Good stop
I would
right
just leave
there.
it at that. I like that, only because, you know, going back to like some of the committees that we appoint that don't have a budget, it might be nice just to be able to,
And there might be something, if you do it that way, you use that money this year for that, but then this other committee has nothing for 4 years in a row.
So, what will, Joe, maybe I'll have
Give
you
us
jump in with me and
flexibility.
Chris.
Yeah.
I didn't know you'd been
The
engaged
only
on
other
this.
thing I would add for your consideration as you think about this is, if it's gonna go through the town, and I'm not sure what discussions Chris or you have had on this subject, if it's gonna go through the town, it may need to go through the free cash process, so it may need to be,
Or we could set up a revolving fund,
I suppose you could, bylaw.
right?
Yeah, you'd have
Yeah.
to establish a bylaw at town meeting, establish a revolving fund. You probably could
Like
do
a
that.
cell tower fund? I mean, we've always talked about putting money into something to either help with folks with taxes, or help with being
Right.
able to buy, land.
Well, like-
I mean, not that $5,000 a year is gonna do that, but maybe this could begin to be, what was the other one that there was, Paul said that we set one up years ago, and then we were gonna look into reusing that. Was that a trust in order to buy property? I think it was.
I can't remember.
yeah. We've had a couple of discussions along those lines. I think if we
That's
just,
a good point, you know.
yeah, if we make it broad. And then we have the flexibility.
Yeah, I just leave it vague, and every year you could find it.
I mean, you could do the Littleton Coalition Against Addiction.
Yeah, I mean, those are all, I mean,
You
that's
know.
very specific.
Yeah, but I'm just saying in general, but every year,
Oh, I see what you're
if
saying.
something was, all right, so I'm just gonna throw this out there just as an example, like, the Clay Soper film, if they had known, we showed that at the high school, the first year I got on the board.
Yeah.
Well, if we had this money set aside, then maybe we could use some of that money for an initiative like that. If we had it, you know, if it was broadly, allocated, it gives us some flexibility to use it where we see it needs to be utilized.
Okay.
Just leave it that way.
Yeah.
So should we approach this with a revolving fund bylaw proposal for the fall town meeting?
I wonder if we already have one.
I don't believe we do.
If we don't, then let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So I'm assuming that Chris has told one or both of you that it can be broad, correct? It
Yeah,
doesn't need to be
we went,
specific?
there was a little more language in there then ending at sole discretion in one iteration. But it's going to require an additional conversation with, I'd say with the three of us at this point, because we're all kind of in on it now. But I think that we can come to some resolution and get this squared away. So can you put this back on the agenda for 2 weeks out? We'll have that resolved by then.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay,
Staying in a cannabinoid world.
the HCA with Littleton Apothecary?
Yes, I think this is a fairly straightforward administrative matter for the board. This is the same document that the board had authorized me to sign on behalf of the board as town administrator for Community Care Collective. This is for Littleton Apothecary. And so I'm asking that the board vote to authorize the town administrator to sign the host community agreement certification for Littleton Apothecary.
I don't see any reason why not.
No.
No.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. DeCoste?
Yes.
Cindy Napoli, yes.
The next one is G7. It is a notification of marijuana establishment. And so if you actually look at the form on this one, the way that it's worded is a little bit, can be a little bit confusing. It says pursuant to 935 Code of Mass Regulations, and then a bunch of other numbers referencing the specific reference there. The municipality affirms that the entity listed above is either in compliance with municipal bylaws or ordinances, or is not in compliance with municipal bylaws or ordinances. And in speaking with Joe on this, who's had experience filling out these documents before, by stating that they are in compliance, you're really stating that there's a path forward for them to essentially pursue the necessary special permits before the planning board. So I would recommend that the board vote to authorize me to complete this municipal response as stated and submit.
This is similar to initially when the state used to say that any applicant had to have a letter of non-opposition. Why they address it in the negative is beyond me, but,
Okay,
so this is kind of the same idea.
okay,
And you're right, in checking that box, it just lets him continue to move along in the process.
sure. Okay,
Did you say that in the form of a motion?
Yes, sorta. I could repeat that
So moved.
perhaps.
So moved.
second.
Second.
All those in favor, Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. DeCoste?
Aye.
Cindy Napoli, yes.
The next item, Madam Chair, we should probably call back.
Matthew, you good?
For the next item, we had, the Elder and Human Services Department had submitted what's called a Helping Hand mini grant to acquire GPS units in the vans for the department. And there is some further information contained in the packet, but understanding we are trying to wrap up this portion of the meeting, the board could vote to accept the Helping Hand mini grant for GPS units in Elder and Human Services vans.
Boom.
Boom the new so
Any
moved.
questions?
So moved.
I was gonna say. It's getting late.
Yep.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste?
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus?
Aye.
Cindy Napoli's aye.
Wise guy.
Madam
And,
Chair, I'm
MJ.
deferring the next two to our Assistant Town Administrator, if I may.
sure.
Lucky Joe.
Oh,
So,
boy.
town council had forwarded to the board a revised draft of the soil removal permit for 9 Air Road this afternoon. According to town council, There was two changes that were requested by the applicants, one being moving a deadline for completing the project from June 1st, 2021 to June 15th, 2021. And the second, moving a deadline for providing the performance bond from July 15th, 2020 to August 1st, 2020. In communicating, town council said, I have no objection to the requested changes, and it seems reasonable to give them extra time to provide the performance bond if they need it. But it is up to the board.
Okay.
So, and at least in looking through the draft, it did seem to me that it was hitting the main points that the board was looking for during its public hearing beginning of June.
Okay.
So the two changes are very small.
Right,
Correct.
yeah.
And the total quantity of soil removal was what Chase was looking at, I believe, is that correct? Or how did they come to the agreement that this was an acceptable amount? Or where did this number, the 160,000 cubic yards come
Right.
from?
And the engineers came up with, based upon the
Okay.
depth and the.
But, I guess I'm asking their engineers or our engineers?
Chase did do some diligence.
Okay, all right, that's what I was, okay, yeah,
Right.
that's all I need to know,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
He met with them and went through the whole thing.
Okay,
yeah, it was pretty
Good enough.
specific.
And he raised some good questions.
okay.
Yeah, he did. It was a very
So-
extensive,
You need to do engineering for dummies to take over where Chase left off.
right,
Start on that.
A phone a friend.
right. Yeah, there's a lot of work that went into this.
Yeah, it was,
Okay, that's
we
fine.
definitely benefit from Chase having
Yeah.
that background.
Right.
I'm good with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. Any other comments?
Move the select board vote to approve the 9A Road permit for soil removal.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Knox? Mr. DeCoste?
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus?
Yes.
Cindy Napoli is yes.
Okay. So, Madam Chair, the next item is 64 Spectacle Pond Road. During my last update on this topic, informed the board that they had submitted an as-built plan, but I hadn't had a chance to review it for compliance with the board's permit. Was able to take a look and verify that not only does it accurately reflect what was on the site based on physical inspections of the site, but then also reviewed it against the conditions of the permit, and that it does satisfy the permit that was approved by the board. I know that there's some other issues that are going on outside of the issuance of the soil removal permit, but as far as this, I can answer any questions as it may.
Okay,
As long as they don't involve fences.
right. That is not incidental to what we're voting on this evening. Okay.
Are we voting on anything, or is it just an update, just to
Well, I mean,
assure
so
us that?
Technically, this is just to show that they're in compliance.
Okay.
The permit didn't require any sort of post-approval by the board to
Okay.
do a final sign-off. It really is just to let you know that from staff's perspective, they've addressed all of the criteria that were laid out in the soil removal permit.
And
Okay.
the berm is the appropriate height, and here again,
Correct.
Chase did
It's
go out and talk to
stabilized, it's
engineers.
hydro-seeded, they have some material to make sure that it stabilizes in case of rain events, so it appears to be more than adequate as far as stabilization and ensuring that grass is gonna grow and that it basically returned back to a grass slope.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Thanks for staying on top of that.
yeah, thank you.
I wasn't calling you a dummy, man.
All righty. And we are at minutes. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the minutes?
But I,
Move the board vote to approve the regular session meeting minutes of June 29th, 2020.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Knox?
I,
Mr. DeCoste? Mr. Nordhaus?
Yes.
And Cindy Napoli is yes. Okay, and so now we are going to be concluding our regularly open session meeting. We're going to be entering into executive session.
Wanna do it?
Yep.
Move that the select board vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A1, to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or to discuss the discipline or dismissal of, or complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. The individual to be discussed in such executive session shall be notified in writing by the public body at least 48 hours prior to the proposed executive session, provided, however, that notification may be waived upon written agreement of the parties.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste?
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus?
Yes.
Cindy Napoli is yes. Okay, so we are now going to adjourn our regularly scheduled open meeting and exit into executive session. Our next scheduled meeting is July 27th. Good night. Thank you.